Chosen Links by Boaz.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest episode of Chosen Links. I'm your host, Boaz Hepner, and this is my fantastic
Nate Looney,
my co-moderator, who I couldn't do this without. We have 14 incredible guests today. That's right, 14. Pretty much the max I feel comfortable having at one time, because we don't want to just do quantity here. We're looking to get quality out of everybody, because everybody who is invited because they are a quality human being. As always, the mission of this show has been from the beginning, not about Judaism specifically. People think it is. Not about Zionism specifically. Sometimes in episodes, people think it's all about science because I'm a nurse. It's all about dialogue. Everybody who's on the show is pro-dialogue. Yes, they also have to be pro-Israel and pro-Jewish. I'm not going to have anybody on this who wants me to not exist. But it's a pretty low bar. We just want pro-dialogue. And here we are with 14 incredible people who have the same value system. And we don't all have the exact same echo chambers that follow us. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a fantastic conversation with 14 amazing people who have individual identities that they want to discuss, and might also want to discuss why they don't want to discuss it. I know that might seem ironic, but that's part of what we're going to do today. Nate and I have already started a conversation, very important one, about the Black community and the Jewish community's bond, fracture, strengthening, weakening it. We had our second episode, which was specifically in the niche about Black Jewish community. We had people coming in from Israel and from America talking about it. And now we have a whole bunch of people representing many, but not all, identities in the world, because Jews can come as religions, as cultures, as ethnicities, and every color and shade of the rainbow. And interestingly, as one person will even show us today, you might even look white, and that doesn't mean you're not a Jew of color. Is that a controversial statement? Well, let's talk about that. Let's get into all of this, because I'm interested, you are, and so are people watching. But first, I want everybody to know who everybody is. So I thank you all for being here today, truly, for having this nice dialogue. So we're going to start alphabetically with Aimee Albertson. Everybody self-identified themselves. I want to point that out. I am not describing people based on how I see them, but rather how people described themselves. Aimee Albertson, Chinese American Jew. Aimee Albertson is a Jewish advocate, educator, and influencer from California who is proudly and loudly uplifting Jewish diversity, reclaiming Zionism and fighting anti-Semitism through social media content, public speaking, consulting, and more. While living in Israel for 6 years, she created The Asian Israeli, where she cataloged her experiences as a Chinese American Jewish woman. This exploration of her own identity and relationship with Israel led her to the work she does today. In 2015, she made Aliyah, where she dedicated her career to working for Jewish nonprofits. Aimee, thank you. You've been a real help, even just in connecting with other people. I really thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you, Aimee. And so next up, we have Lani Anpo. Lani Anpo is a Native American Jew and Indigenous. Lani, also known as Lani Dawn, is an influential advocate for global Indigenous and Jewish communities, a multi-tribal Native American Jew, Sanish, Hidatsa, Lakota, and Ashkenazi Jewish. Please correct me if I've gotten any of those wrong. Lani is passionately champions the rights and stories of marginalized groups with a focus on protecting Indigenous sovereignty, promoting self-determination, and preserving history and culture. Drawing from her rich heritage and personal experiences as a mixed Native Jew, Lani works as an Indigenous advocate and is defined by her inspiration to healing intergenerational traumas while combating the vestiges of supremacy violence.
Lani, thanks for being here today, and thanks for bearing with us as we may or may not mispronounce words that we shouldn't mispronounce.
I mispronounce everything, so it's totally okay. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Thank you. We've got BournRich. BournRich, somebody who Nate helped me meet towards the end, and I'm really excited about. Goes by a Jew living the African American experience. Born in inner city Chicago and raised in Los Angeles, like myself, BournRich is a Black Jewish artist whose work is deeply influenced by his roots in sports, graffiti, hip hop, and skateboarding. Drawing from these experiences, his vibrant murals, canvases, and street art tell stories of resilience and creativity. He has traveled the world teaching art to at-risk youth and continues to create impactful work from his home in Los Angeles. And man, do I love your background.
Yeah.
It's so perfect for you.
Got to see you do some live art to music the other night, and it was just fantastic to watch your brilliance. So really glad that you're able to be here with us. So
Thank you.
happy to introduce Emily Bowen Cohen, Muscogee-Jewish, someone who is a pillar in our LA JOC community in a lot of ways. Los Angeles-based artist Emily Bowen Cohen creates comics that explore intersectional identity. She is Jewish and a member of the Muscogee Creek Nation. Emily uses personal experience to tell stories that examine contemporary American and Jewish culture. Her debut graphic novel, Two Tribes, is published by HarperCollins, native-focused imprint, Heart Drum.
I am right now reading it. I was reading it over Shabbos, and it is really, really good. And the style of it, by the way, I'm a comic book geek. I've grown up reading comic books. It's a really good style. I'm loving it. Whenever they do the back
thank you.
Great. We'll have to talk.
Everyone should get a copy, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And by the way, just so you know, Nate and I have for years until he moved away gone to the same shul. It's the same shul as Emily, so we've all known each other for a long time. Okay, we have Jenny Cohen, Mexican Jew. Born in Mexico and a proud immigrant to the USA, Jenny Cohen is the love child of a Mexican mother and a Jewish father. Blessed to be a dual citizen who is originally from Guanajuato, Mexico, who grew up partially in upstate New York and central Arizona, Jenny has dedicated her life to the discipline of competitive running among other sports. An artist-athlete, an all-American runner who obtained a BA in theater as well as an unaccredited master's in Strasberg acting technique, all the while immersing herself in real estate in her mid-20s. She was on national television shows such as reality TV's Tiny House Hunting. The Jutina and proud Zionist has overcome alcoholism, now over 3 years sober. A licensed California real estate agent in the San Francisco Bay Area, Jenny identifies as being North American and a proud member of the tribe. She loves Israel and went on a birthright trip in 2012, which inevitably changed Jenny's life for the best, even connecting with family who live in Israel presently. Passionate about justice, law, and of course, Tikkun Olam. Cool little side note, Jenny. You were on Tiny House Hunters. Invisible to the audience in the background, the person filming for us, our friend Patrick, for 19 years, was the producer for the show House Hunters. How do you like them apples?
Wow, that is a small world.
Pretty cool, right?
Small world.
Very cool.
Great to have you here.
Thank you. And good pronunciation on Guanajuato. That's not the easiest for everybody.
My wife and I went to Guanajuato, and that's where actually within a few days of that, she found out she was pregnant with our son, who was Liam.
Doesn't surprise me. It's like
Guanajuato
one of the most romantic.
That's where the mumias are, I believe. That's where Los Mumias were, the little.
Wow.
Yeah, little
So was your child conceived in Mexico, like made in Mexico?
No. That's where the test came back positive.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say I was made and born there.
No, but I will tell you that when our daughter was in utero, she was little Bean. We called her Bean. So when she was pregnant with him, found out in Mexico, he was Pepito. So we always called him Pepito the entire time.
Wow.
There you go.
That is cool.
All right.
So next up, we have Abraham Hamra, who is a Syrian Jew. Abraham is a managing partner and chief growth officer at Cohen, Tucker, and Aids, PC, a leading U.S. immigration firm. He is a Jewish Syrian refugee turned American citizen, has advocated for victims of anti-Semitic crime, and spoken on several panels with regards to combating anti-Semitism. He has spoken at rallies, synagogues, and other events about the current conflict and anti-Semitism from the perspective of a Syrian Jew. Further, Abraham runs an Instagram page in which he produces videos speaking out against anti-Semitism and in support of Israel from his unique perspective, and educates the about Jewish history and Israel. As a displaced Jew from Syria, stopping the rise of anti-Semitism in the form of anti-Zionism in the U.S. became a top priority. He is actively seeking bridge building and has made alliances with Muslim and interfaith organizations in an attempt to work towards peace and coexistence with honesty, leading the conversation. In addition to English, he also speaks Arabic and Hebrew.
And I'm jealous of that skill.
Hello.
And
I'm up in my Duolingo game though on the Hebrew thing. It's like it's hard.
Duolingo's great.
I'm a product of the pathetic / okay Jewish school system of Los Angeles, where I spent every single year learning Hebrew, and yet after my first semester of Spanish in high school, I spoke more Spanish than all those years of Hebrew.
Duolingo's doing better than any of my college Hebrew classes. It's so crazy, you know. So
In California,
they're not paying for this, so you know, make that.
But Abraham, thanks for being on this. There's no question at some point we got to do an episode about Syria, and you're going to be first on my list to call for that.
Yeah, let's do it for sure.
Next up, we have Eliana Jolkovsky, Korean American Jew. Eliana is a medical student at UCLA, my alma mater. Born to a Korean immigrant mother and an Ashkenazi father, she has always been proud of her heritages. From her unique perspective as a Korean Jew, Eliana feels a responsibility to teach others about the beautiful diversity of the Jewish people. She aspires to become a physician activist who utilizes her platform as a doctor to fight anti-Semitism, especially in healthcare. And Eliana, I don't even know if you know, but in the background, I'm in very close touch with / going to my shul with me and Emily is Kira Stein, who leads the—
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Kira's amazing. She's been leading the effort on anti-Semitism at
Yeah,
UCLA.
what's it called? JFRG? Is that what it's called?
They call it JFrog, but it's JFRG, Jewish Faculty Resilience Group.
There
But
you go.
they go by JFrog.
And so for those who haven't been following, they've basically been showing what's happening behind the scenes with the faculty of UCLA, not just the students, the faculty behind the scenes, and it's coming from the med school perspective. So Eliana is right at the center of it. She's pretty much emblematic. Yeah.
Okay, moving on because we want to get through these.
Yeah,
get
to
the conversation.
Talk about Mari.
So Mari Katz O'Leary is a Hispanic Jew. Mari was adopted at 3 days old to an amazing Jewish family in New Orleans, Louisiana. Her birth mom was Hispanic, and Mari is grateful her birth mom was brave enough to give her up for adoption. She grew up going to Reform Synagogue and felt very closely connected to Judaism. Mari has had her bar mitzvah and found herself confused as an adolescent. She began drifting away, focusing on art and drinking more heavily. Mari went to UT Knoxville and Virginia Tech with a scholarship in art. However, drinking got the best of her and she lost herself spiritually. Fortunately, in 2013, she had a spiritual awakening and met her now husband and has been sober since January 8th, 2015, and has found her way back to Judaism. She started a recovery group, Recovering High for Jews, and since October 7th, she has found herself fighting for Jewish people everywhere, especially the hostages.
I love that. Recovery High. That's such a fantastic name.
Yes.
Recovery Life. I love it.
Yes, it's a lifelong process. So
Thank you. And Mari is full disclosure behind the scenes. She has collabed with me on many of my reels. So she and I have been really growing tight and bonding over a lot of this activism. So thanks for being here.
thank you.
We've got Iola Edwards-Kostrzewsky, Black Sephardic Jew. Iola is a proud Jewish advocate, mother of 6, and lifelong Minnesota resident dedicated to community engagement and social justice. Currently serving as the Minnesota Community Engagement Manager for the ADL, Iola works to combat hate, support vulnerable populations, and foster collaboration between communities and law enforcement. Their role is deeply rooted in addressing bias-motivated incidents with a focus on empowering marginalized voices and strengthening relationships within Jewish and broader Minnesota communities. As a criminal justice student, Iola is combining academic pursuits with real-world experience to deepen their impact in advocacy and leadership. Thank you, Iola. I appreciate you being here today.
So we're going to go to Aimee Lacaden, who is a Pacific Islander European Jew. Aimee is a Hawaiian Portlandian, born in Maui, raised in Portland. As a Jewish Asian American growing up in a predominantly white community, she navigated both the advantages and challenges of being different from a young age. Raised in a 3-generation household with her Holocaust survivor grandmother, Evie, Aimee was inspired by her grandmother's legacy of sharing her story. Today, Aimee represents the 3rd generation of Holocaust survivors, offering a unique Asian American Jewish perspective on identity, history, and resilience.
Thanks for being here, and thanks to Eliana for bringing me Aimee. And
Yeah,
now
thank you, Eliana.
And Aimee is probably going to be bringing me her grandmother, who I told her I would
What?
totally want to do an episode with Holocaust survivors. We got to lock in some of those stories while we can.
Absolutely.
I have the last 5 remaining in my back pocket whenever you'd
In
like,
Oregon.
or who speak in Oregon. Last 5 minutes.
And my friend is the acting director of the Museum of Tolerance, and I already told him if I do this, will he get me people? And he said no problem. So
Beautiful.
we're on for that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And for those of you who are wondering, how could this be 2.5 hours? You're like, I get it now.
We just wait till we get to the discussion questions.
Everybody gets their due respect, though. So intros are important. And here we go. Matthew Nouriel, Iranian Jew. Here's somebody who is going to probably be on like 17 of my episodes. He's such a man with so many hats. Matthew serves as the Director of Community Engagement at JIMENA, Jews Indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa, and is based in Los Angeles, California, just like we are. An activist and content creator of Iranian Jewish heritage, Matthew is dedicated to advocating for LGBTQ+ rights, promoting equality within the Iranian and Jewish communities, combating anti-Semitism, and supporting the Women Life Freedom Movement for a Free Iran. Let's make that happen, please. Matthew actively works to expose the hypocrisy within the anti-Israel movement and to counter claims of pinkwashing, especially following the events of October 7th. He highlights the significance of fostering connections between Iranian and Jewish communities, promoting Iranian Jewish solidarity. Through his social media presence, Matthew engages with those who resonate with his perspectives and experiences. He frequently participates in panel discussions and speaking engagements across North America. He has held leadership roles with organizations such as JDC Entwine, JQ International, and the Tel Aviv Institute. His written contributions have appeared in publications like JNS, The Forward, and Hey Alma, and he has been featured in media outlets such as the Jewish Journal, Tehran Magazine, the Al Jazeera, and the Jerusalem Post. And that's not even everything. You have to cut things out of his bio just to get there. These two have gone to Israel together, I think.
Yep.
And Matthew, I'm going to have him on stuff about Iran. I'm going to have him stuff about LGBTQ scene. I'm going to have him... God knows. Matthew, thanks for being here. It's awesome.
And I'm grateful to say that Matthew's not the only person I've been to Israel with on this call.
Who else?
Raymond as well. We recently just got back a little while ago. So all kinds of different interwoven connections on this call.
Well, thank you for having me here, guys. It's a pleasure to be with both of you and with everybody on the panel.
A pleasure is ours, and I'm not just saying that. We don't get paid to do this. This is a pleasure. If it wasn't, why the hell would we do this?
On a Sunday night? Come on now. What better place to be than with all these fantastic folks that we have here. So next up we have Tabby Refael, Iranian American Jew. Tabby is an award-winning weekly editorial columnist for the Jewish Journal of Greater Los Angeles. She has also contributed to Los Angeles Magazine, Newsweek, Los Angeles Review of Books, and Moment Magazine. Born in post-revolutionary Iran, Tabby came to the U.S. as a protected Jewish refugee and is also a child survivor of the Iran-Iraq War. She has served in the realm of pro-Israel diplomatic and nonprofit Jewish advocacy for many years, and is also a co-founder and former executive director of 30 Years After, the nation's largest Iranian American civic engagement organization. Tabby holds a master's degree in public diplomacy from the University of Southern California.
Awesome. And Tabby lives near me, and Tabby's going to co-host with me and playing the role of Nate when we do a series about Iran, which is going to be important. And Tabby has written in articles about me, and Tabby is a great example of somebody who I know, like all of you. Here's something I'm going to cut ahead to because I know we're going to talk about it. The elephant in the room. We talked about it in our Black Jewish episode. Isn't it fucking annoying that the first time you're on an episode, all you're doing is talking about the color of your skin and ethnicity? Aren't all of you more than that? I think the answer is yes. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you all at least minorly find it irritating that this is the topic that sort of circles the ship all the time.
And full transparency with that, we've had people that have said no to being on this because they're like, I'm sick of talking about race and ethnicity.
What's the point? Enough. I'm more than that.
Ask me about fundraising and development or other areas of expertise. Don't ask me about race. So recognizing that, you know, by you all saying yes, it was a choice to be here and be a part of this.
So I want you to know that I'm going to make you the promise 2 hours earlier than I did everybody else in the Black Jewish one, when I told, you know, Rachel Moon and I told Elisheva Rishon, you're going to be in fashion episodes. And I told Chaya Lev, you're going to be in a comedy episode. You guys might all be starting in episodes where it is talking about where ethnicity falls into things in terms of identity. But at the same time, I swear to you, and I'm a man of my word, that that's not going to be the only thing you're going to talk about. Emily already knows she's going to be talking to me about Jewish comic books. Tabby's going to talk about Iran, etc. I'm not going to go down the list.
All right, let's finish this.
Let's continue.
Now, Yoav, it's really okay with me. We can stop at Persian for me. That's all I got. I know it.
I'm glad you said something, because the reason I brought this all up is because I know that it's a kind of a pet peeve of Tabby's, that people to her just want to talk about Iran over and over again and just want to talk about Persian. And she's an incredible journalist who has so much to say about so many things, but the default always ends up being about Iran. And while that is an extremely important elephant in the room, it shouldn't be the only elephant in the only room.
It's okay. Honestly, like I said, it's all I got.
Uh-huh. My ass. Okay. All right, we got 2 more important people to get through. We've got Raymond Leon Roker, Bahamian American and Ashkenazi. God, I love these descriptions. Raymond Leon Roker is a visionary media executive and storyteller whose career spans music, publishing, and advocacy. Born in the Bahamas, proudly identifying as a Black Ashkenazi Jew, Raymond has spent decades championing diverse cultural narratives that challenge boundaries and foster understanding. He founded the groundbreaking music magazine Herb, it's URB, pronounced Herb, a defining voice in youth culture and electronic music, and produced the acclaimed 2020 documentary Coachella, 20 Years in the Desert. Now channeling his creative vision into the nonprofit and advocacy space, he collaborates with thought leaders to build bridges across communities. His identity and lifelong commitment to storytelling make him an influential voice in conversations about Jewish diversity and inclusion. He's even working on cool projects that we're not even going to talk about, because he's got his fingers in hat in many different places, and it's really cool to have you here today. Thanks for being here.
Privilege. I just have to say this is quite a cast, and several of you I've already been in your DMs, so it's nice to see you up on the screen. I can say hi officially, so great to be on this with you all.
Cool to have you slide into our DMs.
So last but not least, we have Elizabeth Younger, a Choctaw Native American Jew. Elizabeth grew up in Southern California after moving from Florida, with a few stops in between. Raised around the film industry, she initially pursued law and psychology, ultimately earning four degrees, including a master's in clinical mental health counseling. She is a proud mother of 2 daughters and a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma through her father, and of Jewish heritage through her mother, embracing both sides of her family's cultural and historical legacy. In addition to her academic and professional accomplishments, she has done screenwriting and founded her own film company. She is also the author of a book about her grandparents, including her grandfather, who served as a colonel in the United States Air Force.
Now that is very cool. And now, welcome to all of you. It's quite a Brady Bunch we have over here. So awesome. So thank you all for being here. Honestly, we now we want to really get into the thick of it, where again, you guys just have fun, but let's talk about the issues. Now, one thing that I didn't actually put in there, but and so Nate's not going to see it on his paper, but I want to sort of put out there to see how Nate and you guys want to talk about this. I said to Nate in the background, how are we defining who we're inviting? What if somebody is, for example, a Jewtina, but they're a white? They're saying, but I'm white. Nate's answer to me was,
it's up for each person to self-identify how they identify as a Jew of color, if they choose to identify as a Jew of color. It really comes down, it's not about proximity or skin color shade. It's about lived experience and how you move through the world. And this is something that we often see that comes up when it comes to collecting data and demographics around who is a Jew of color, a Jew of from a diverse background, solely going off of which boxes somebody checks. So for example, if you have someone that is Latino and Jewish, but does not identify as a person of color, we can't automatically assign them to the category of Jew of color because that's not how that individual identifies. And so this makes it extremely complicated to be able to wrap our minds around what does it mean to be a Jew of color or a Jew of a diverse background. It has to come down to just asking the question, how do you identify? I can't superimpose what I think your identity should be onto you, which is something important for all of our viewers to understand, is that it's up to the individual to identify themselves.
which is why everybody next to their names, if you can read it on the bottom, self-identified. And it's why I can tell you, I spoke to some pretty cool influencers online who were from Brazil and Argentina, and I asked them if they were interested in being such a thing, and they were like, I'm not a Jew of color, I'm just a white Ashkenazi living over here. But then on the other hand, I talked to, and let's start with Jenny Cohen, and Jenny was afraid that there was going to be, I was wondering if there was a little bit of imposter syndrome there, because I was saying to her, well, you keep talking about being a Mexican Jew, you keep talking about being a Jew of color, but Jenny's fear seemed to be about being, well, other people don't necessarily see me that way. But I said, but do you see yourself that way? She said, absolutely. So I said, well, then we need to have this conversation on. So let's start for a minute over there with you, Jenny, if you don't mind. Why do you feel like a Jew of color if everybody on the street sees you just as another white girl?
It's a really good question. You know, I think people see what they want to see, and I think that goes like in any arena. For me, it depends on the context. Sometimes, you know, people just sort of focus on one thing, and what I had to do is sort of do a lot of searching on both sides, because I do identify, I'm super both, right? I'm as much as you can be, but I'm, you know, literally split down the middle. I see myself as both. I'll never see myself different, but like depending on like the person, they may see me only in one light, you know? And so like I might not be enough for one side, I might be a little too different for, you know, but that's just like anybody. And I don't think it really even came to my attention till later. And I always saw myself as a person of color first, which maybe was weird when I started getting like, you know, a director who's from Ghana, and she's still one of my close friends. And she was like, you're not a person of color, you're a Jewish white girl. And I think that was one of the first times, and I was in my early 20s, I think, at this time. And I think that's when I started to realize that the way I see myself is definitely different than the way other people see me. But, you know, I just think that it's a blessing to be part of both, you know, double the diversity, double the fun. And I should say, thank you, Boaz, for encouraging me to do this, because it was fearful. And I think that, like, you know, I keep hearing you go with the fear, you go with, do the things that make you most scared.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I thought it was important that this panel not just be a panel where everybody could just hold up a color palette to say, oh, I see why that person's there. Okay, I see why that person's there. That shouldn't be what this is about. This is that's not what identity is. So I'm glad you're there. Can I just ask, as just a general raise of hands, have every single one of you, in your own experience, would you say that that's a true statement, that the way you see yourself is not consistent with the way everybody else constantly sees you? Myself included, by the way, for the most part.
You know what's interesting? Well, I just had a moment that's really just a magical moment. I was just thinking about that conversation that Boaz and I were having about identity. And I was walking around Manila Mall in Jerusalem, and it's kind of like crazy, like, wow, that was only a few weeks ago, and now we're here. You know, I can say for myself that as a Afro-Latino Jew, there are multiple times, no matter which arena that I'm in, where I often don't feel like I'm enough of whatever. So, you know, it took being a part of the organization JIMENA Eco for me to actually start more openly identifying as a Latino Jew. Even though my mother was born in Panama, Spanish is her first language. I have got her passport at home, but because of the color of my skin and the fact that I don't speak Spanish, I didn't feel like I could actually have a piece of that as something that I identify as, even though if you go into my kitchen cabinet and look at the seasonings I use, I'm very much a Latino based on what's in my cabinet. So I think that it's really important for us to always like honor the different parts of ourselves, and there really shouldn't have to be in tension with each other. We should be able to honor the wholeness of who we are. So
Can I come in from a different angle completely
Please.
here?
That's what we want.
So the idea of Jew of color for me, right, is a little bit problematic because it assumes that Jews are white. And I feel like as by and large, Jews are not white. And we do not fit into the racial structures or the American racial structures or the Western world's racial structures, which if you really looked into it are racist to begin with. We do not fit as white, black, brown. And so many Jews struggle there. And I'll be honest, I struggled as well. After some thinking, though, I believe the better phrase to be used with regards to all Jews is Jews with varied diasporic experiences, because that's what we are. We're all from, one nation that had different roads, different paths, different diasporas, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in Syria, and you picked up different cultures. So, for instance, European Jews were more affected or assimilated certain things of Christian culture, while Syrian Jews and Iraqi Jews and Mizrahi Jews assimilated things of Arab and Islamic culture. So I think a better idea or better way to express ourselves is, if we wanted to sub-dissect our identities, is through our diasporic, I don't know if it's a real word, it sounds great, experiences.
Out of curiosity, show of hands, how many people here feel the heebie-jeebies and hate the term Jews of color in the first place? Just curious.
I feel like it separates us from Jews, and like Jews are Jews, right? And
Yeah.
One
Can I jump in?
I want to name something. Like, I don't hate the term. I've used the
Yeah.
term to describe myself in the past. It's fine. But I find more and more as I delve into this term, and also the work we're doing with JIMENA, with the demographic studies that we're doing, it kind of backs up everything Abraham just said. And also, like, for example, Abraham and I are both Middle Eastern. Our diasporic experiences were from the Middle East and North Africa. And when you ask me if I'm a Jew of color, I know what that means, and it's okay for me to say yes. If you ask my father or my aunts, uncles, any of them, they would have no idea what you're talking about. So I think it's important to take into consideration as well.
Piggyback off of like what's being said of the term JOC came out of trauma, and I am very anti-naming yourself after a traumatic experience. Like, it came after Jews of color who were like, we feel othered in Jewish spaces, so therefore we call ourselves Jews of color, rather than like, let's sit down and have a conversation about colorism. Like, if you want to have a conversation about colorism, like, we can talk all day long on that, because that's very real within Jewish community. But when you say JOC, it's the same way I feel about like BIPOC. I hate the term BIPOC. It waters down everyone's experience to everything is the same, and does not at all acknowledge the differences in the room.
Absolutely.
I would like to
power dynamic there.
I think it's important to not conflate race with ethnicity. I think, at least in my opinion, I think race is an externally imposed category, or the way to categorize people based on how you're perceived by other people, and usually people in power, right? Or at least historically. And when this happens, when someone is imposing an identity onto you, they're erasing your ethnic identity and your lived experience. So I think it's extremely problematic for external groups to be imposing white Jew or Jew of color onto our community, because we are all Jews. We all have varied experiences, and most of the time, the variation in our experience comes from other factors aside from our Jewishness. As Jews, we have a lot of shared experiences. Yes, like I said, we have our own unique experiences within that, but I think as a whole, like, we are Jews. We originated in Judea. We were prosecuted and expelled and sent into diaspora, and from there we've mixed and mingled, and we have all of these beautiful diversities within our community. But as Jews, we are Jews, and I think it's extremely problematic, like I said, to allow external forces to impose and further divide our community based on our skin color.
I think that I just want to chime into that I think this whole terminology thing ends up, I find myself getting stuck in this conversation of semantics with people, because we do need a term to define us. I'm on the board of B'Kol Lashon, and we try very carefully not to use the term Jews of color. We prefer to say multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural Jews, but that's a big mouthful that you have to say all the time. The other thing is Jews of color is very triggering for people who, I guess, might not find themselves in the category of Jews of color. That's also a whole other thing to unpack. In which case they don't want to discuss what the issue is at hand, which Iola said is that there is a different treatment, and we do find different experiences based on having, being in a whatever the mainstream Jewish environment is. And so I guess we're at this crossroads as a community of, we need to address that issue. We need terminology to talk about it. If you're going to be so offended by the terminology, fine, let's use another term. But I'm not here to talk to you about if you like that term or not. I want to talk to you about the issue that I'm addressing via the term.
So
that's a really good point. Hold on. One thing I want to jump in. There are two things that I think are really important here that are worth naming. One being that the term JOC is very much a North American construct. You go to Israel and you say JOC across the board, people are going to say, what's that?
What's it?
Yeah, what are you talking about? So that's one thing. And the other thing that I think is really important to notice to talk about is the fact that we are in a phase of growth as a North American Jewish community and as a global Jewish community. If we think back to 10 years ago, the term JOC was just being adopted, and it was a way to give name to some of the differences within our community, and two, to be able to start strengthening a leadership pipeline that previously had not existed. And so in that way, it created this vehicle to be able to allow many Jewish leaders to have entry points that previously didn't exist. However, now we're in a different time phase where it's like, okay, we've already figured that there's diversity in our Jewish community. That's broad stroke. Now, what is the next level of how we identify ourselves and identify the full diversity of our Jewish community without having to single out any individual identity? Abraham.
Yeah, I want to push back on that. I think there is a term, right? And that term is just Jews, simply as Jews, right? I think the easy way of going about ourselves is dividing ourselves and saying, hey, he's a Jew of color, he's a Jew of non-color, I don't know, white Jew, he's this Jew, he's a that Jew. And this way we can teach others or be able to refer to ourselves with others. But what the hard work that is required of us, that I believe is the right approach, is to further amplify what Jews are. The term Jews within itself is already a packed term of diversity and culture and richness that from Judea to Babylon to wherever we went in the diaspora. So there's a lack of representation in the media, in the news, whether it's being on interviews and activism, whether it's our Jewish organizations and the speakers they invite. There's a lack of amplification of our voices. Now, I'm not going to reduce myself and say I'm a Jew of color. No, 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 no. I'm a Jew just like you're a Jew, just like everybody else is a Jew. And so it is our job to demand that we and our stories and our identity as whoever we are is being represented equally in the media and around the world as to what a Jew is. And therefore, we won't be having this discussion of how do we refer to ourselves to be seen. We just be seen because we're amplifying each other.
I have one comment about that, though.
Go ahead, Aimee.
I would just like to say that Jews of color is a new term to me. I actually had to ask Boaz what JOC stood for, because my worldview growing up in the Pacific Northwest in a predominantly white world with a white mother and a white family, being the first generation Jew of my family. My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and so she wasn't raised Jewish. She didn't raise her children Jewish, my parents, and then I was the first. But back to that, Jews of color is a new term to me. I could see where it can be a little problematic. But for somebody who's not known of all of the different racial expansions of being a Jew, I think it's a good start. And I think this conversation is a good start. And I think October 7th opened the eyes for a lot of worldviews that were kind of dimmed like mine.
Go ahead. I'll let you go first. I got something else to do.
I feel like, and remember, we have a little bit of context coming off of our last conversation being with Black Jews, so we had part of this conversation. I feel like it's a little bit of a no-win situation. Because I can tell you, yes, as a white Ashkenazi Jew, I can tell you as somebody who has reached out to each of you, but also to many other people over the last year, that when I talk to people and I say just Jew, like Abraham would like, which conceptually makes sense for me, and just call everybody Jews, sometimes they take offense because they feel like I'm basically underrepresenting what else is important about them. And they say, I'm not just a Jew. I am a Black Jew. I am a Caribbean Jew. I am a fill in the blank Jew. And then on the other hand, when I say Jew of color, they'll say, I detest that term because of this, that, and the other. And then when I say, well, you're a Filipino Jew, they'll say, well, why are you putting that on me? It's kind of a like no win. I dodge
it's
here.
A double-edged
but
sword.
I do think there is, because the points that really kind of stuck with me were about this sort of creating a brand out of trauma, and that really resonated because we the collective we society, we do that a lot. And then I also feel, to Amy's point, about sort of languishing in this sort of semantics mud pile, because it does take a lot of effort and time when what's on the screen for a lot of folks here is the specificity that really sort of speaks to who we are, right? Like, I don't get a lot of mileage out of just calling myself a Black Jew. I like to give note to the fact that I was born in the Bahamas. My great grandparents immigrated here as Ashkenazi Jews, and I'm American. So Syrian Jew is another way of like specificity, like that gives me something. So I do feel like the definition, to the point made, is sort of a helpful tool while we're having this sort of, we're turning some corners into, listen, I grew up in Los Angeles in the Fairfax district, which is a heavily, Ashkenazi, Russian, Eastern European Jewish cohort. I didn't know Israelis other than, I think, one friend when I was in junior high, until, I went to Israel, in my 30s, and I didn't even understand the story of Iranian Jews, or much less Iraqi Jews. And so for me, my learning path of coming and understanding one version of Jewishness into understanding the full is still ongoing. And so I do find these conversations and this Brady Bunch window, like I'm looking at here, is quite empowering for my journey. So I do feel like we need to be sympathetic for others that just don't even know us on the screen. They don't know prototypes like us. So we've got some work to do still.
And also,
I'd like to say something. Hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Greetings from LA. First of all, for me, always announcing that I'm an Iranian Jew is an answer to the question, you exist? Because unless you are from LA or possibly Toronto, Great Neck, or Iran itself, my former homeland is 99% Shiite Muslim. That 1% is not comprised of Jews. That remaining 1% is comprised of Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, Baha'is, and everyone else. So number one, that is my answer to that age-old question. You exist, right? Just like today, you couldn't blame somebody for asking, Lebanese Jews exist, and again, Syrian Jews exist, right? Number two, the experiences that I had growing up in post-revolutionary Iran made my Jewish identity so unique from other Jews that I had met here in America that I did feel the need to create that identification, right? The experience of somebody born in post-revolutionary Iran going to a school system that forces you to scream mandatory death chants against Israel is going to be different than the kids that I met, in the Beverly Hills Unified School District when I came here as a refugee. God bless their free schools. The third one is, and I'll end with this, isn't it so fascinating that I've never, and you may never have either ever heard the term a Christian of color? Or, hey, everyone, we're having a panel today on Muslims of color. What?
That's because those religions don't operate the same as being Jews. Being a Jew is not just a religion, it's an ethnicity, it's a nationhood. But I wanted to say something about the whole concept of this, is that language can be used as a tool and it can also be used as a weapon. So for me, advocating for diverse Jews, multi-ethnic Jews, if I have a conversation with someone, you can call it whatever makes you feel comfortable or safe or whatever. For me, I want a tool to have the conversation about diversity in the Jewish community. And that includes not only celebrating the diversity, which everyone loves to do, but no one wants to talk about the hard questions of the othering and the problems we have there. So for me, it's like, great, community, you don't like the term Jew of color. I don't really like it either because I have that issue. Like, there's a lot of issues with it, but one thing is like saying Ashkenazi is white, but like, I'm Ashkenazi. I think a lot of other people on this call are also Ashkenazi. And that doesn't mean white, but we can unpack that in a whole other conversation. But it's like, yes, we need a tool to have the conversation, and I'm happy to use whatever tool the rest of the community likes and feels safe and comfortable with. And I don't like the term Jew of color. I feel it's like people think it's a weapon, right? So that's where I see this problem. But we need language as a tool to have these conversations. And so Jew of color, throw it out, don't throw it out, could care less. You can tell me to call you a dinosaur Jew. Like, I really don't care what it is, but like, give me the term that you want to use as a tool for the conversation. And then let's just have the freaking conversation instead of having 2-hour conversation about what you want to call us.
So this
I'm kind of with Abraham with when he says I'm just a Jew. I feel like this is kind of delaying the Mashiach to come because we're so divided as a tribe. We should definitely come together and stop like gatekeeping and putting titles on everyone. I feel like we're one tribe and we have to come together, especially since October 7th. It seems like we're on that path, and then as the war got kind of longer, we kind of start fragmenting and people start going on their own sides again. I feel like again, the term is not a bad term, like you said. It's not a bad thing. You can use it however you want. If you feel like it's weaponizing, then okay, but it's used to describe people that don't necessarily feel okay in a space where it's predominantly Jews that pass for white. So again, I think as a whole, we got to come together. Let's stop putting titles on each other. We're all Jews. We got to come together and bring peace and light to the world.
This brings us actually to one of the, we have a bunch of questions we will or won't get through, but this is actually perfect segue for what a lot of you have said.
Yeah.
This is from Zora Bannon. She's actually an Iranian Jew, a photographer, I believe. and she's got a nice presence online. And she was really conflicted about us doing this. She told me, she said, this is really hard for me because I do have questions, but I also wonder if, like, is having this conversation a good idea? Is it a worse idea after October 7th? It's a conflict. I see that internal conflict. So here was her question. Realize this is coming from a, let's just say, JOC, right? She might hate that I said that, right? Coming from an Iranian Jew. Does identifying as a Jew of color reinforce societal divides, such as oppressor versus oppressed dynamics? Does it unintentionally suggest that some Jews are white? That's where she's coming with it. So I'd like to go there with it. Who wants to jump in?
I think that's exactly. Sorry.
Let's
Who
start
wants to
with
go?
let's start with Emily, who we haven't heard from at all today.
Hi, thanks. So the question is whether or not Jews of color is going to divide people to have this conversation and reinforce that Jews are white. And I just think that, I had an opportunity to speak to a lot of different college campuses right after October 7th. And I think I was brought in because there was very little awareness that there were non-white Jews. And I was brought in to speak to more diverse audiences. And I found that it was actually like a very powerful tool to combat anti-Semitism in order to amplify the fact that Jews of color exist. It just sort of made the conversation a little bit easier. That's all. I think it's necessary.
I feel like I agree with what you're saying, and that it's a good way in to have that conversation because we're viewed as solely white people. But I feel like the conversation definitely has to go further, especially in terms of educating people on who we are. They need to know that Jewish culture is a Middle Eastern culture. It originated from the Middle East, and whether your diaspora experience was in the US, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Ethiopia, or anywhere, that's where it comes from. So I feel like it's important that they know that we're not white Americans at the end of the day.
I think that the term, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it does give us a term to use to have these conversations, but at the same time, it's something that is being weaponized against our communities, again, by external communities, by external people, right? And it promotes the idea that Jews are from Europe, when even by European standards, not all Europeans are white. It's denying or erasing the fact that Jewish people have been racialized, despite our proximity to whatever skin tone you want to look at. That Jewish people have been racialized and othered, and were not considered white. And the only reason that Jewish people began to be considered white is because white society needed it, right? So their Jewish whiteness is conditional no matter what your proximity is. And I think that when we use this term to divide our communities, I think that we can have conversations about the issues that exist within our communities, about colorism and about just issues related to that exist within our communities, right? Because the same thing exists within Native American communities. There's colorism both ways. And I know, my siblings and we all look different. And my younger sister, who is, she has a closer proximity to whiteness, but she struggles a lot with discrimination. Constantly, like her and my middle sister have a business together. It's an Indigenous owned business, and they're getting a lot of publicity, and she's always excluded because of her skin color, because of the features of her hair. So her experience, her history, her connection to her identity is constantly erased and invalidated. And I think that that's something that we need to just be aware of, because right now we're dealing with a movement against Jewish people to not only divide us, but to erase our ethnic identities and our connection to Israel through this divide, saying that some Jews are white and therefore European, and some Jews are people of color, and all of it erases the fact that we are Jews from Israel.
Yeah, I think it's important, okay, on some levels, right, to have these different backgrounds, to actually make a stronger point about Jews and show more of our faces, and you know, and in the world, as far as these people that just think they're these Ashkenazi or these European Ashkenazi isn't even the right word, but the European Jews, right, which is false. But I've noticed that after I got this invite, and there was something about like mixing identities or religious type stuff, I started really questioning, like, wow, do I even fit in with Jews now that I'm like the Native American Jew? You know, should I take it out of my bio and just be like, you know? So it kind of had me thinking, do people not like me because I'm also Native American? They don't like Native Americans. Some people don't like Native Americans. And so it got me really thinking, like, maybe that's why people don't talk to me, or, you know, have me going all these different places. And but so it can be good, right? I think it's good for the world to see that, like, hey, we're not alone. You're back, you know, we're gonna back Israel, and we're all here. And then but as far as like secular or being at an event, or am I going to feel different now because I'm Native American, and like there's this thing, because I identify more as being Jewish, right? But like I'm not going to let go of the fact that I have a tribe and a card and the history with my grandmother on my dad's side and what they went through. And so really conflicting right now.
And that's kind of like making me think about this, the feeling of othering that many people feel both within our Jewish community and broader society. And so like the fact that there is that rub of like, oh, does this part of my identity being out in the open create this sense of othering happening? I think that's something that like we have to think about as a community. One other thing that I was thinking about is there are two separate conversations that we could have here around the topic of Jews of color. One being the ways in which it could be used to further divide our community, and the ways in which it's used to give space to an experience certain demographics of our Jewish community have within the Jewish community. And one thing I'll say about this with a little bit of a caveat is there's been a big shift post October 7th. And we got into this on one of the other calls where many of the Black Jews that were on the call were joking about the fact when you walk down the street and say Shabbat Shalom to somebody, oftentimes you get thank you, or you just get a weird look. Post October 7th, when I say Shabbat Shalom to somebody walking down the street, I get a Shabbat Shalom back without it being like, oh, why are you saying Shabbat Shalom to me? Or how are you Jewish? It's just
depending where you are.
Well, yeah. So I'll say we're lucky we're in LA. Like there were some Ladniks at the beach with the menorah on the back of their car. And so of course I rolled down the window. I was like, yo, Hanukkah Sameach. And they were like, Hanukkah Sameach, and kept on going.
Yes, Amy, I'm in Oregon right now too. Oregon is very, very white. So I know.
And that, I mean, back to what you were saying, Elizabeth, it is, you're feeling torn, right? And you're saying like, it could be like, you asked two things. How is it tearing, you know, the world apart? And how is it kind of like adding a worldview? For me, I've only been able to say either I'm Pacific Islander or I'm Jewish. I've never, ever, until October 7th, been able to say I am both. And there is a place for me, and there are people like me. Really, like it's been kind of sheltered. I've had people say, you don't look Jewish, and that's how I was raised. So the people that I felt comfortable saying I'm Jewish in front of was with the comfort being around my grandmother, who's a Holocaust survivor. You know, you don't mess with a Holocaust survivor. You don't like if I'm related to her, even though I don't really look like her. This is her, by the way. I don't look anything like her. It's hilarious, but we go everywhere together. Yeah. And she's like 4'9". So we don't look anything alike, but I'm like, no, she's my grandma. And then people are like, okay, yeah, you're third generation, you're Jew. So I have a place for that. But I've never really had a place as I'm a Jew of color. Like I am Korean, I'm Filipino, I'm Hawaiian, I'm Jewish. here I am, you know.
Mhm.
So for me, this is new and I love it. But I can see the other side as well.
I also I want to chime in and say also I'm with you, Elizabeth, and I love what Raymond just put in the chat. We can be both A, Jewish, or B, a person of color, ethnicity, nationality. And I think for somebody who was adopted into a very white family, I've struggled a lot with color. From a very young age, I asked my mom at the grocery store, you know, why do I look different from you? And I went to a private school in New Orleans where there should be a lot of diversity, but I was one of the only Jewish girls in my class and also a person of color. And so I've carried that throughout my life, trying to figure out who I am exactly. But I don't want to erase the fact that I did have a birth mom who was from Honduras. And, you know I don't speak Spanish, but I hold that near and dear that I have a piece of me that was from South America. And so all of this has just been like eye-opening for me. And I can't help but to think about my children. As of lately, my 6-year-old, during Shabbat service 2 weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, he turned to me in the middle of the service and he said, Mommy, 2 boys were really mean to me today. And I started crying and I said, well, what did they say to you? And they said, your mommy is brown, you're brown, and your dad is white. And my heart dropped. I started crying during Shabbat. And it's like, where do we begin this conversation with our kids? And what do I tell him? I'm struggling with that right now. And so this has been extremely eye-opening to me.
That's
what
so
I want
outdated.
myself.
That's so outdated too and inappropriate. It's like,
So
you know,
this is our reality. And I want him to know though that he is a strong Jewish boy and he will be a strong Jewish gentleman growing up, but also he is somebody of color and his skin tone doesn't define him, but it also is a part of him and it's a part of me. And I don't want him to lose sight of that his color is beautiful. People pay for a color like his, you know, having a tan. But he's also Jewish. And
Nobody should ever have to erase any part of them. And that's really that's really the sad truth, is that when people feel like they either have to go to an extreme to show this is who I am and I'm going to say every single thing, then you've got the problem that Abraham is feeling, where you're just like, can't we just be Jews already? And then on the other hand, you don't want to have to erase those parts of you which are so fucking important. You know, there's a Hebrew term, lehavdil. So I'm going to just say lehavdil, which is completely different from what I'm going to say. So the smallest violin in the world for what I'm going to say. But me as a white European Jew with parents from England and Germany, I will say there are aspects of what you're saying that I can completely identify with. No, it has nothing to do with the color of my skin, but it has to do with the fact that many of you said already, it's really frustrating walking around and not really being fully seen the way I see myself. When I walk around, and if I ever am in a circumstance like where, let's just say I'm at a casino trying to take other people's money playing poker, I'm taking off my kippah, okay? I don't need to be that Jew trying to take people's money at a casino. So my kippah comes off. When I'm in that circumstance and people I lose a part of me for a minute, because people start talking to me as just another white boy. And sometimes that's when I start seeing the anti-Semitism starts going in, and they just start talking about those Jews and those Israelis, which I don't get as readily when I have to keep on. And it makes me feel like I'm letting my own entire tribe down for a minute, and just makes me want to take their money even more. But like, it makes me feel sad and a little bit nauseous and a little bit gross, like I am erasing a part of myself, because the rest of the time when I'm wearing scrubs at the hospital, this kippah is on and I'm loud and proud about it. But it's sad because most Jews are not modern Orthodox like me. Most Jews don't wear kippot most of their life, and you're walking around even just as a Jew, not necessarily being identified as a Jew. And that's a part of it where it's like, how do you feel when people are missing that part of you? So,
well, it must be.
Yeah, but when we want to walk, I want to walk into a synagogue and do exactly what you said, Abraham, that we're all Jews. and be a Jew and just be there as a Jew. But a lot of times when I walk into a synagogue, everyone wants to know what I'm doing there. Everyone wants to know, how are you a Jew? How did you get here? You know, how did you end up in this place? So as much as I would love that reality of we're all Jews and I come into a Jewish space and I feel equal and accepted and just as Jewish as everyone else, and how did I, you know, how was I became Jewish? Probably similar to the way you became Jewish, but because I look like this, you want to ask me a bunch of questions about it. And so that's where—
That's the gatekeeping I was talking about.
Well, I'm gonna say, like, Mari, as the mom of, like, I have a 13-year-old who's like going through bar mitzvah. So when you like said that, I like brought up an experience of like him being the N-word at a Jewish event. So, like, I completely, people got chewed out. But it's this conversation that makes me lean more into my Judaism and my family more into my Judaism, because we can walk into a shul and you can question me, but the moment my son gets onto the bima and can read Torah, like, what are you going to say? There is no, well, where are you from? How are you Jewish? It just is. But I also think, like, the elephant in the room of Blackness within these conversations that often gets erased. Like, I'm just going to name it. It gets erased in these conversations. And there was the othering that, Lani, you brought up, of Jews were racialized as white. They're racialized as white to be even more anti-Black. It was literally to divide and conquer, because redlining, like, I live in Minnesota, we had historical redlining, especially within Jewish and Black neighborhoods, of if we classify them as white and they can get the home loans, we can keep Black people where they're at, and then they can move out. I don't blame a people for doing that. Self-preservation is a Jewish value. And if that means, like, you're able to survive and make it and provide more for your kids, I'm not going to judge you. If Black people are asked, do you want to be racialized as white today? I think many of us would be like, yeah, if that means, like, I get all those benefits, like, yeah, like, it just is. But, like, for me, this conversation, I've leaned more into my Judaism, but it also comes from, as a Black person, having to already work 2, 3, 4 times as hard to just prove yourself in society. So when you're already in Jewish, like, environments, it's just like, okay, I know the game because society has prepared me for this. And I just know how to roll with it in a shul.
Just jump back to, and on the point, which I agreed with Matthew, he brought up before, as to Judaism really originating from the Middle East. So to me, when I hear these statements, and this is how I take it, it's not that Jews don't come in different packages, or I want to erase every unique aspect of being Jewish. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is, to call me a Jew of color or to call me a Jew of something other, when I am the technically original, right? The Middle Eastern, I don't go around saying, hey, you're a Jew of white skin. I mean, I'm not saying that because the world sees Jews as white skin, but whose problem is that? Is who's ever underrepresenting us? Why are we taking the onus on ourselves to differentiate ourselves from the tribe to get that representation instead of demanding that representation, right? Demanding that movies portray more, a Black Jews, or like Aimee, a Chinese Jew. At the end of the day, I don't need people to delete that part of them. And look, Aimee, if I came from Syria, my time in Syria as a Jew, in my wildest imaginations and my wildest dreams, I probably would have never assumed that there would have been a Chinese Jew. And I met you, a Chinese Jew. And now we're speaking and you're telling me about yourself and your identity as part of your experience. But that identity is still wrapped into what it is to be Jewish, right? So once I learned that and I absorbed that you're a Chinese Jew, and you come into my synagogue the next time, maybe the first time I have a lot of questions, and that's natural and that's normal. And we need to stop making people, I think, feel bad for asking questions. It's good to know. I don't know that I didn't know that there was a Chinese Jew or Jews from Ethiopia, for example. I had no idea they existed in my time in Syria. This also explains the early racism in Israel. Judaism means so much to so many of us that we guard it. And so when you're coming from one diaspora to another diaspora and you're meeting a different type of Jew, you're not understanding as a human how is this person the same as me when they don't look exactly like me, or they're somewhere else? Again, it depends how you lived it. There's nothing wrong with having conversation and showing our uniqueness, you know, telling you about what it means to be a Jew from Syria, telling you my story so you can carry that away. But at the end of the day, I'm a Jew. I'm not a lesser Jew.
That's right.
In any respect. And that's
I
where
agree. I think this, like, to lead into like maybe a new area of the conversation is like that a lot of Jews, and I'm speaking from a North American experience or observation, right? Because it's definitely different in Israel, but a lot of, I don't know what we want, like, the American Jewish community doesn't know about the diversity of the Jewish community. Last week, a shagger was here at a friend's house and she was talking, and she said she went on like 13 different tours, and she met so many teenagers that came up to her and said, I never even knew Ethiopian Jews existed. And so it's like, people don't know Syrian Jews existed. I'll admit, because I didn't grow up around a lot of other Jewish people, I thought Ashkenazi was a word for Jews, like in a different language, and I didn't know that there were Mizrahi or other types of Jews until I got to college, and I met different types of Jews, and for me it was like, great, I love this and whatever, but for other people it's like just not so easy for whatever reason. But yeah, like a lot, I would claim, I mean, I don't know if there's any data, and anyone here who works at like an established Jewish organization gathering this data, I would claim that a majority of the North American, at least, Jewish community, not in places maybe like LA or New York that have a lot of diversity, don't know that different types of Jews exist.
And I think you're getting to a really important point here, because I think there's, like, Abraham, to what you were saying as far as like seeing diverse representation in media in various outlets, broad stroke, but then there's also the education within our own Jewish community of who is a part of our Jewish community, so that, you know, little kids aren't talking to other kids in day school about the color of their skin and not recognizing that they're all Jewish, all, you know, going to be preparing to go into their bar mitzvah. One other thing I just wanted to mention is, I think that what we're getting at here is the importance of getting in conversations and having real, true dialogue, which we're showing here that we are not coming to one clear answer on anything. However, I will kind of caution people a little bit around their curiosity when they're engaging with a Jew from a diverse background on the first meeting. Because if you can imagine, I'll speak from my own personal experience. I walk into shul, and you know, there's some people that hadn't seen me in that shul before, and they come up to me and they ask me, "How are you Jewish?" By the sixth person that's asked me how I'm Jewish before we've, you know, even gotten into the first part of davening, I'm kind of ready to go home already. And so, you know, what I kind of encourage people to do is be curious about something else other than the first question being, well, how are you Jewish? It's like, so you live in the neighborhood. What's on your Shabbos table this week? What's on your Seder plate? Just start there and get to know and be willing to share something about yourselves instead of immediately being like, so which one of your parents is Jewish?
Have the conversations you would have if there was another new person walking in the shul, the same way we always do. Hey, did you move here? What you do?
So do you have,
nice.
Are you married?
That's
Are
awesome.
you looking? Like these are the sorts of questions we can go into something a little bit different. So we literally have 13 questions here, and I think we've been through one.
That's good. It's fine.
Can I make
Doesn't bother me.
can I make two hyper
Go
quick
for it, Raymond.
points? So one is about the sort of current ability to trace ethnicity. That's a pretty modern thing, a 23andMe sort of era. You know, my mom is in her early 80s, and I literally had a conversation with her the other day about whether my kids were Jewish or not by nature of the fact that their mother is not Jewish. And I had to sort of explain, you realize Jewishness is an ethnicity as well, and they are literally Ashkenazi descendants. So there's a generational gap of understanding just in how we become to be, whether it's through marriage, conversion, or what. You know, the other piece of the puzzle here is just a nature of, you know, we are identifying in an area where people are sort of awakening literally to the Jews in their lives post October 7th, and they're starting to ask the questions that they never even really considered. And so I think we're just in a very curious time. So we're probably all going to have to operate with a little bit of patience and compassion for people who are either stumbling through this discovery, both themselves, but also being met with that. So I do like Amy's sort of call out, way to be curious without being you. Grace.
I like that summation very much. Before Nate's about to read another question, he actually said something that he touched on, which I just have a thought, and I think actually we are all going to agree with this, but maybe I'm wrong. I should make no assumptions. He mentioned about school, kids. Let me just mention, there is something that we're, all of us, myself included, who've grown up going to Jewish schools, we're doing a little bit of a disservice to ourselves or to our kids, which is that if we send ourselves, when I grew up here going to Hillel and Iola, which are the local Orthodox institutions, the only thing that I basically saw were kids were, for lack of a better term, were other white Jews and Persian Jews. My whole class. I mean, boy, Persians to me are as common as white Jews because I grew up here in LA. But that was it. There were no black Jews in the class. There were no brown Jews in the class. There were no Asian Jews in the class, and so on. My daughter, my wife, grew up going to public school here in LA. My daughter, based on her decision-making, is not going to the Jewish schools. We're getting her the Jewish education separately. She's going to the Jewish public schools. Reason number one, well, you can always say the money. It's a hell of a lot of, it's way too expensive. But other reason number one, right up there with it, diversity. My wife finds it so fucking important that our kid grows up differently than me. I grew up and I made 1 million friends as year one in college, right? Year one in college, fine. I immediately had friends from everybody because I make friends easily, all right?
Truth.
But not everybody is like that with me. And she wanted my daughter to have her experience. Addie grew up going right here to Laces with every single type of friend. The only thing everybody had in common in Laces is they were all nerds. They were all geeks. They were all good students. That was what they had in common.
Yeah,
they were.
You got to be a good student to get into Laces.
Exactly.
In the first place.
So they were Indian and they were Persian and they were black and they were everything. And at the end of the day, that's what we want for our kid. My point, getting back to this before the question is, kids don't have to end up growing into the adults that we're used to seeing, who see Aimee and who see Iola and see all of us walk into shul and say, hi, are you Jewish? Are you converting? Are you adopted? Are you fill in the fucking blank? Kids, when I told my daughter's teacher, I am nervous about my daughter being the only Jewish kid in her class, she said to me something very wise. She said, they are first graders. The first day they see her and she says Jewish, the first time you visit with a kippah, they're going to say, what's that? That's weird. The second day, it will be as normal as anything else because it's literally just immersion at that point. And she was absolutely right. I've now visited her campus, and day one, people looked at me with my kippah. Day two, I'm just another dad there at the school. The kids are excited, and I taught them about Hanukkah, and I taught them dreidel. So my point is, we've got to get them young. We've got, oh boy, don't take that out of context. I'm going to get canceled. We've got to get to these children when they are young and they do not have the shit that we learn from society and the biases from media and social media. We've just got to immerse them and show them we're all colors of the rainbow. We're not born racist. We all get our racism from our parents and from our grandparents. Let's just let them be exposed to us, because if this is my daughter right now, she wouldn't wonder about any of your skin color. You guys just look like all of her aunties. She would call all of you auntie and uncle, because that's how we have her talk to friends. That's what I think we should be doing.
I think this is like awesome, and I'm so glad that you had that experience in the public school, and I think that's beautiful. Right. My children, we started them in Jewish day schools, the same ones that you went to growing up, and we had to pull them out because I found it was the lack of diversity they didn't welcome it. It was not a conversation where it was like, oh, I need to tell you one time that I'm Native American, and then they'll just accept it. That was not the experience that I had. And I didn't want my own children going through the same misunderstandings that I faced when I was growing up. So, it was just a matter of, we had to pull them out of Jewish day schools. So I think, it is, and I would go into class and I started going into and talking to the fourth graders about being a Native American and contemporary America. It was a problem that was bigger than just like speaking up about being a Native American person. Yeah, I don't know what the problem was, but there was an unwillingness from the rabbis, I think, to have a conversation about diversity. I'm not sure if it had to do with intermarriage or what it was. This is a modern Orthodox school, but I just, we can try to get them young, but I just feel like there's something happening in the Jewish community, which isn't, something's going on that needs to be addressed.
It's not wine and roses, and I agree with you. And you're just speaking to why Addie wants our kids not to be in the Jewish schools. I'm in the same agreement with you. I wish it were different, but it seems to me that in the public schools, they're more, for better and worse, they're more into talking about and celebrating diversity. Again, for better or worse, sometimes it's a little too talked about and at the expense of certain other people, but then as a result, though, we can celebrate it and it can be more normalized. I agree with you. This might be a whole other topic for us to talk about, the unfortunate negatives in the Jewish community where they're not celebrating the diversity enough and you're just always an other.
So Eliana, I saw that you were gonna chime in.
Oh yeah, before you ask your next question, I just wanted to make a related comment. And as I said, I'm currently getting over a cold, so if I have a cough attack, please edit that out. But overall, I felt personally overwhelmingly welcomed and loved by the Jewish community as a mixed Asian Jew. But there have been several times where I've felt like an outsider in the community, as I'm sure many of you have. Although I have to say, most of the times it's without malicious intent. For example, sometimes other Jews speak to me as if I'm like currently in the process of conversion, or as if I don't know anything about being Jewish, even in synagogue, while even though I grew up going to Sunday school, I went to Hebrew school, became a bar mitzvah, keep kosher, went to Jewish summer camp for 10 summers, family in Israel. I'm very much in touch with my Jewish identity. But a lot of times other Jews have the assumption that I don't know a lot about being Jewish or about Torah or about our traditions, and sometimes lecture me on it. And when this happens, usually I'm not offended because I can feel that it's coming from a place of wanting to help me and teach me and actually include me. And also, to be fair to them, the Korean genes really did dominate and take over my appearance. So I don't hold it against people for not assuming that I'm ethnically Jewish. But when I explained to them my father's Ashkenazi and my mom converted before she had me to Judaism and I go to synagogue, their reaction is more kind of fascination and wanting to know more, which I think is sweet. Now, I've also had similar experiences being a mixed Asian in the Asian community. Other Asians have told me that I'm not a true Asian, or that I have gotten a couple comments saying, you're not Korean, like go cry your white woman tears, or I don't know. And when I visited my family in Korea as a child, I was known as the American kid in my grandma's village. So I think that feeling like an outsider is not, I think it's a reality of mixed people, not just mixed Jews. But as I previously said, I've honestly felt very welcomed and loved by the Jewish community.
I love that you're taking it all very positively, but at the same time, I hear your story and I'm cringing because I'm like, oh, it's so condescending the way that you're talked to. And even if the intent is nice behind it, it's there's so much ick factor there. So I know intent is a lot, but
it's hard to be mad at it, because
yeah,
people don't know that
you can be mad, but you can still be disappointed.
I think you're a better person than me, because sometimes I have to I hear the conversation and where it's going, and I immediately have to tell myself fix my face and not get an attitude, because I know where this is going and I don't want to have to pop off on this person, even though I know that it's coming from a right place. They just might be the seventh person to ask me the same question.
Right.
Lani, go ahead.
I think that my perspective, because I am reconnecting to, I guess you could say, my Jewishness, the moment I acknowledged that I was Jewish in online spaces, I was instantly white. Like, it completely erased my Native identity, which was what I've always identified as Native. It wasn't until I've always known that we have Jewish ancestry. But it wasn't until more recent years that I began to want to explore that part of my identity and reconnect. And so when I experienced that, it was like an instant, complete erasure of my lived experience and my identity. And it didn't matter what I looked like. Just because I said I was Jewish, I was automatically white. And I also think, like I said, I think that that's very problematic. It's one thing if you as an individual want to identify as white. It's another if people outside of our community are imposing that onto you just because you are Jewish. And I do think that we can still, like I said, have these conversations about the issues that exist within the Jewish community about colorism and racism, because that exists in all communities. It's something that affects mixed people of every single background. We deal with not being enough of either constantly, no matter what we look like. It doesn't matter that my entire life I was Native. It wasn't just I identified as Native. I was treated as a Native. I experienced, I guess you could say, like anti-Native discrimination or whatever. But as soon as I said I was Jewish, that was completely erased. It didn't matter anything about what I look like or my lived experience. It was completely gone just because I was Jewish and people view Jews as white. I do think it's important to have, like Aimee said, terms to be able to have these conversations. My issue is when the terminology is being imposed by people outside of our community instead of how we self-identify.
I have there's three questions here, and in one shape, in one form or another, some of the answers have been kind of spoken about already, and so I kind of want to take a little bit of a different turn with where we go next, because right now, up until this point, we spent a lot of time talking about identity, Jewish identity, ethnic identity, and I'm curious if we can sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the differences post October 7th. And what are some of the shifts that you all have seen in your personal or professional lives post October 7th, given your various identities?
Are you talking about in the Jewish community or outside the Jewish community?
Take it wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah,
I mean, so
two different answers, I can imagine.
Yeah, post October 7th, tell us how the world has changed in this respect.
I mean, I can tell you one thing that was noticeable for me with my online presence was before October 7th, and I used to not really talk about it, but I talk about it now a lot more, is that the amount of hate messages or negative messages, you could say, that I got were mostly actually not from anti-Semites. I don't know if it's because I'm Asian and they just couldn't fathom that I was Jewish or whatever. They were from other Jews telling me I'm not Jewish and questioning my Judaism or my Jewishness or my Jewish identity and saying, oh, you're such a great advocate, but you're not really Jewish. Caveat here, I'm patrilineal. So anyone here who doesn't consider that I'm Jewish, fine, that's fine. But you don't need to come to my space and tell me that to my face or to anyone else's.
Totally irrelevant.
After October 7th, people were suddenly so excited about me being Asian and Jewish and saying, look, tagging me in comments, this is Aimee Albertson, she's a Chinese Jew. Don't you know that there are different types of Jews who are not white? So yeah, everyone after October 7th wanted to celebrate Jews of color or whatever a lot more than they did before. That's an experience that I had.
I am gonna go out on a branch and say it's not celebration, it's tokenization. Let's 100%. It is. I'm gonna prove that Jews aren't white. So let me tag the few Jews
that I know
out of here white.
Yeah.
Let me tag them all to prove a point, even though I did not give a damn about them before October 7th. They didn't care.
Or before, I would have questioned, why are you in my shul and I want to talk to you and find out how you ended up here. And now I'm like, oh, we have a diverse Jew in our shul. Yes, this is the best. Look, everyone.
But they are more listeners, and
that's
they are
true.
going to hear.
And I will say, like Matthew mentioned earlier, it is a door opener, and I'm more than happy for the Jewish people to put me in front of an audience of people who won't listen to a white Jew or whatever. I'm going to say the same things about Israel that they are. And if you can't handle that, this is who the Jewish people are. And I'm sorry, not sorry for you.
It is a form of tokenization, and I felt it more and more. After October 7th, early on, I would say I had the same reaction as Aimee did. It's like, great, people are actually interested. I spoke Arabic in my first video. People were like, wait, I didn't even know you were Jewish until like you started speaking Hebrew or something and you said you were Jewish. And I'm like, people are really interested and it's amazing. But then you realize that once your opinion doesn't match the mainstream opinion of whatever it is, you're thrown to the side, right? You're suppressed, not even thrown to the side. You can tell me I don't agree with you and I can tolerate that, accept that, and you're in your space and I'm in my space, and that's fine, but you're actively suppressed. So for instance, me personally, I take a much harder, much more straightforward stance when it comes to the Israel-Palestinian issue. I don't really care about appeasing anybody or not hurting anybody's feelings on the other side, because my lived experience was being ethnically cleansed by the same ideology, by the same demographic of people. So it is absurd to tell me, right? It is almost as equal to tell somebody who escaped slavery from the South, like, watch your tone as how you speak to white people. How are you going to tell me watch your tone as how you're going to speak against this Palestinian ideology or even this Palestinian demographic when they are the reason? They are my oppression. And so that part is not respected. I don't care about you seeing me for my color, not my color. It's understand my experience. And if you want to use me to say not all Jews are white, hey, Jews are from Syria, then allow my experience to be amplified the way I want to say it and the way I want to amplify it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Nahon.
That was a mic drop.
Yeah, that was but FYI, there's a lot of, for people watching, there's a bunch. This has been wonderful. We've actually never had this in past ones, but there's a lot of chatting amongst them on the chat, which isn't going to show up on the video.
Well, I think it's
people are so interested.
I think it's kind of interesting too that in this post 10/7 world we live in, that and several of you are on the screen here, but including you, Abraham, have become so visible advocates for common sense, defending Israel, explaining the conflict, and I think it's kind of one of those, what people say, like, I didn't have that on my bingo card. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card, that this sort of front-facing, I'll put it in quotes, but sort of non-white presenting face has become the face. It literally has become the most powerful face of the conversation. And I think this was not anything, it couldn't have been obviously planned, and nor was it something that people even understood what it would mean culturally. And now we're sort of finding ourselves in these, you have a lot of American advocates, pro-Israel advocates, that are white presenting, trying to have conversations that sort of are dead on arrival in many ways beyond sort of the choir. And you have a whole new face of advocacy that is really changing the tenor of what's being discussed and how it's being discussed. And I think that's just putting this whole sort of cultural, ethnic conversation in upheaval. It's sort of, I think this part of this conversation, beyond the sort of JOC analysis, is almost like this is its own 3-hour unpacking, which I know we don't have time, but like we're living in a very interesting place right now where the tip of the spear of this conversation is made up of people like Abraham and you, Matthew, and others, and Aimee, that are out on the front lines, and Lani, that are doing work that, sorry to say, rank and file white presenting Jews in America couldn't do and aren't doing and are failing at. So that's what's really fascinating right now.
Well, and I think what to your point, Raymond, one thing that's exciting about this time is there have been a lot of Jews that have been saying, hey, put us in, this is something that we really understand being the bridge. And up until October 7th, the opportunities didn't look the way they do now, as far as people being given platforms across multiple sectors. And I think that's something that's really, really important and is going to be really a big part of the future of combating anti-Semitism in our interfaith communities is when you have people from various backgrounds that go into communities where they culturally see eye to eye in different ways and are able to help people understand the depth and the diversity within our Jewish community. It's something that just hasn't happened in the amplified way that it is now, which is I see as a real tremendous opportunity for bringing people together.
Do we think that when this is all over, or whatever the fuck that means, but do we think that when this era passes us and we're not in an October 7th universe anymore?
No,
This
is the future. We are the future.
Is it the future? Is it?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna respectfully disagree.
I don't know.
Because
we got some disagreements here.
I disagree.
This is what I want to see.
This is being rooted, like right now, all of this is being rooted in trauma, like point blank. This is trauma.
Yeah.
It's a trauma response. And what happens when the trauma or the threat is no longer there? We revert back to our old ways, point blank. So like when all of this is over, whatever that looks like, we're going to bounce back to whatever the old ways were. And we see this time and time. Heck, Black History Month is a really great example of this. Leading up to February, no one gives a damn. Come February, you hear about all these Black people, all the things. Like, we've invented so much, you learn so much. And then literally February 28th, they don't even wait till March 1st. February 28th, it's okay, now it's Women International or whatever, Women's Month for March. And you don't hear about us anymore. Like
till Juneteenth.
Yeah, until June. Well, Juneteenth is no longer ours, but that's a whole nother conversation. That would make some people mad. So I'm not gonna go there.
I love Iola so much.
I think it's like, to get back to a positive, but it's very related to what Iola just said, is October 7th obviously was a huge tragedy for our people, no debate. But something positive that came out of it was that a lot more Jewish people, whether they're passing as a white person or passing as any other person in this world, found out that that's not okay for them anymore, and that being Jewish is actually super important for them personally, but also in this world. And so we see a lot more people trying to, express their Jewishness and to engage with their Jewishness in much bigger ways. And I think that's really great. But a thing that I think is a huge, I don't know what you want to call it, but like a thing that we really need to pay attention to that you just identified, Iola, is that it was sparked by a trauma, by a terrible tragedy. And you really have to overcome that justification of, I need to be more publicly Jewish and I need to engage with Jewish life because this bad thing happened, because of anti-Semitism. You have to move into the, I'm a proud Jew, I love being Jewish because it brings me joy, it brings me guidance in my life, I'm rooted in new values, in new traditions, in the peoplehood and all of that. And you have to jump over that hurdle of, I did this because anti-Semitism, and now I do this because it's fulfilling for me, regardless of if people love or hate Jewish people.
If I could also add that the reason I'm unsure about it is because when it first happened, after the initial shock wore off, there was this silver lining of this unity between all of us, which for somebody like me, and I'm sure many of us here, was an incredible thing to behold. And it was like, wow, this awful, horrible, horrendous thing has happened. But at the very least, we've all come together to fight against it. And then what shook me was that all vanished so quickly as soon as the election started to ramp up, and everybody's political, American, non-Jewish political divides got in the way of it. And that to me was sobering. And that to me just showed me how fragile that unity is, and how much more important it is. It's not, I had it wrong before. I thought, oh wow, this horrible tragic thing happened and at least it brought us all together. But no, what the real work is in, how are we going to ensure that we remain unified, because it's our unity that is our biggest strength. Mm-hmm. So that's my 2 cents on that.
One thing that I see, because most of the I guess the perspective that I speak on, or however you want to word it, is combating the narrative that Israel's a colonial state, that Jews are colonizers, illegal settlers, and really trying to redirect the narrative and show that Jewish people are indigenous to the region and Israel is a decolonized state. And I have gained a huge platform from that, primarily Jewish people. But the moment I bring up something that is related to indigenous rights that is not related to Israel or Jewish people, specifically indigenous rights here in the US, that same crowd has a lot of negative stuff to say about me and what they really think about indigenous people. And I think that's something that is really disappointing to witness, especially from American Jews who love my platform, unless I'm for me speaking on the indigenous rights of Jewish people until I speak on the indigenous rights of any other indigenous group. So I know it's not directly the same, but it's just something that's, like, from my perspective, someone who is reconnecting. I don't have a lot of the same experiences you guys have with experiencing discrimination in the Jewish community the same way, because I don't have that same, I didn't grow up with that same connection, or I didn't grow up around the Jewish community at all. But that's been, I feel very tokenized, and it's so frustrating to, as someone who is specifically an indigenous advocate, to watch the American Jewish community respond that way when it's about Native American rights.
Now, we're gonna about to get and switch a little bit. I want to ask some questions about Indigenousness. I also want to get to some like actionable things that we can do moving forward. But I know that Abraham, who it's already midnight for and has to wake up in a few hours for his law practice, I know he's gonna have to be the first to bounce. So Abraham, do you have any final thoughts you want to give us before we lose you? Because I don't want to lose you while we're talking to someone else.
No, I wanted just to add, I know exactly what Lani was talking about, and this, this continued feeling of tokenization. I can tell you, I've been invited to a few panels and speeches, and a couple of times, not only once, the host at the end of it would come up to me almost shocked, like, "Oh, you did really well." Like, why? With all due respect, like, I'm an attorney. I've built 2 7-figure practices in under 10 years from graduating law school. I've sold one. Why do you think I'm this barbarian who can't control himself or his speech or anything? I know which audience, where, when I'm talking, how to speak. And so it's this, I guess, lack of wanting to, or fear to having a real conversation. The one way to truly be united is to be able to have varying conversations on something I and somebody else here will disagree on. Unity doesn't mean we're going to come and at the end of the day, we're going to agree and say, "You know what, Matthew, you're right, I'm wrong," or whatever that argument is. Unity is being able to come to the table and look at each other and say, "You know what, both of you have good faith. Both of you care about the topic that you're debating. So I'm going to sit there with an open mind, non-judgmentally, listening to you, giving my input, and we're both going to work together to see if we can come to a good resolution that we can both agree on. And if not, we're in great company, because most of the Talmud is rabbis disagreeing, and the ending is 4 rabbis with 4 different opinions, and you follow who you want to follow." And so I think that's true unity, and it's not necessarily that we have to agree on the same thing. If we kind of recenter our brain to that, I think it'd be easier for people to unite more often, or whatever. Unite.
Abraham, and you're just confirming something that both Boaz and I agree with, is like, on Instagram, you'll see sometimes there'll be some comments on some of our posts that kind of go sideways. And our overall practice is to leave it there and let the dialogues happen in the comments, because
Iola knows about what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it. I won't name any names, but as far as the individual we're talking about, but like, it's almost like it's the Talmud of Instagram, the way people are going around and around, and like, we like to see that, because it's important that there's a variety of viewpoints. However, we did have a situation where there was an individual that wasn't coming to it from a standpoint of trying to learn or be a part of community, but
always
was just kind of like going at it in a
He
harmful
didn't
type
like that my poster named you all as leaders, and he started to say, "Why are they experts?" And I said, "I didn't say experts. I said leaders."
What
I
makes
said,
them a
"What's the
leader?
difference? What makes them a leader?" I said,
I lead my 4 children very
I said
proudly.
lived,
Oh my
lived
goodness.
I'm a Abba.
experiences, talking about it all the time, being asked to speak about it in actual functions. Again, lived experiences. Well, I would have more experience if I just took a class for. I would just.
It went
every day. It
sideways.
was like, do I block him? No. Do I block him? No. Do I block him? No.
You know, he's
Do I block him?
Name him.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sounds like you wanted to be on the Zoom.
No, he was
he
angry.
didn't need to be on the Zoom, but it just is like, you know, I'll let somebody poke
needed,
bears
wanted
at
to.
me.
Name
because
him.
It for the amount of people that don't think that this is something that we experience, for it to be there in living record is important. But that was an example of like, well, that's a little bit too far. That's the red line. You're done here.
Well, he threatened Iola.
Yeah,
My red line is when there are threats made or when there's spam. I block
We're
people.
done.
Yeah, I block people only when it gets to something that I could say the reason I'm blocking is this reason.
And
Bye-bye.
And so with that, this kind of pushes me towards this next question. I have there are 2 questions. I know we're getting close to time. But this and I can't even follow that person anymore because I blocked them.
Me too.
But this kind of gets to the security point because I know, you know, for a lot of us that have a public facing image, there's often a concern about security. And also when we're talking about when we're going into our Jewish communal spaces, there are different concerns with security. So this question comes from Rabbi Hillary Charney. And the question is, what do they wish Jewish institutions understood about their personal experiences with security at Jewish events? And so I'll just preface this by saying that we know that for some people, having security is anxiety inducing. For other people, not having enough security is anxiety inducing. And so it's a broad spectrum. And so the question here from Rabbi Charney is, what do you all wish people knew about your personal experiences with security, if it's even relevant for you?
It's nuanced. I'm going to say this as like, I professionally work with police officers every single day. Like I'm always calling a detective for something. But personally, like my cousin was murdered by St. Paul police in the 90s. But I'm also taking classes with like future police officers who like truly want to give back to their community. And at the same time, religiously, like going to my shul during high holy days, the first people my children see are police officers. Like it is a very nuanced thing in which I mentally have to make just little boxes of just like, these feelings are here today and tomorrow we'll unpack them, or tomorrow, whatever. But there's a lot of nuance to it. There's so much. And like, I live in Minnesota, and when Minnesota like makes the news, it is because our officers have shot someone who was unharmed, like point blank. That's why we make the news. It is very nuanced for me and situational based.
I agree. I would say that when it comes to all of the events that we put on for our Holocaust survivors speaking at universities, middle schools, high schools, we do not hire security. A lot of that is because the security that we do hire is in Oregon. They're not Jewish, nor do they, I don't know, we just don't trust them as much. So the security that we would have for our Holocaust survivors are our family and the friends that we know. It's the community that we build. That's the security that we hire. But I guess it really just depends on where you are. It is nuanced. I agree.
So
I gotta say, like, JIMENA, when we do events, we need armed, like, I'm not showing up unless there's armed guards.
I agree.
Don't think I would have said that
Yeah.
prior to October 7th, especially because we're in California, especially because JIMENA is based in San Francisco. They're crazy over there. I'm not showing up unless there's an armed.
I feel like in a post-October 7th world where they were with people they trusted who ended up drawing the maps has made me lose a lot of faith in humanity. And especially what just occurred in my hometown of New Orleans. Security is so important, and it is jarring at first, and we have had to have many conversations with our kids, even though they're 4 and 6. you know, having a cage-like appearance around their schools is not to keep them in, it's to keep bad guys from getting in, and having the police presence is a gift. And I shared earlier in the chat that we had to prioritize security over diversity when it comes to sending our kids to Jewish day school. And unfortunately, in this day and age, since October 7th, they have increased having us pay a couple extra $1,000s to have added security. But at the end of the day, I do feel safer dropping my kids off at school. And that is just the reality of the situation right now. I won't go to an event unless there is security. And it's sad, but this is where we're at right now. The world is just crazy.
But I think it's not about just security. It's up to us to secure ourselves and our family. If you can, get a weapon, go to a gun range, get pepper spray, whatever you can. I conceal carry. So just know that, you know, it's about securing your family and your loved ones, and just being safe when you walk around the city. That's all. And don't live in fear. Like it says a million times in Torah, thou shalt not fear, fear not. You know, live your life, be proud, be Jewish, but also be smart.
I know an awful lot of people, left-wing Democrats, who've always not even dreamed of getting a gun, and post October 7th, I know that they're trying to get to learn gun safety and go into ranges and stuff. So yeah, you're absolutely speaking. You're not speaking just one partisan speaking. We're just talking about humankind.
Yeah, it was a comedian at the Festival of Lights that Stand With Us did. And he said, have you seen a gun range in LA? It looks like Chabad.
Yes.
Well,
I would be curious if Matthew agreed with me too. I feel like as an Iranian American, I spend half the day trying to warn other Jewish Americans to take security more seriously.
Yeah, I think that's
Listen, it
JIMENA as a
depends. It
whole.
depends where you are. We're in LA and Southern California. Matthew knows this. There are Iranian operatives everywhere down here, to the point where a restaurant in Orange County was busted a few years ago, and the waiters were spies on behalf of the regime. Okay,
Wow.
like a restaurant. So I have to tell you, Simchat Torah is the most, before October 7th, even Simchat Torah was the most triggering holiday for me. I would go out into the streets of Pico, and okay, I guess there are barricades, right? But the roofs are unsecured, like the windows are unsecured. And it's so sad, but I will tell you, on September 11th, 2001, I was young, but I realized then that the Middle East had arrived in America. And last week on New Year's Eve, it was another really horrible reminder. That is an area where I do think Jews from the Middle East can be helpful to the greater American Jewish community. We lived it. We have that fanaticism, trauma in our DNA. And I wish maybe more people will listen to us now when we say, you know, look, what is it about globalize the Intifada? I'm pretty sure they're globalizing the Intifada, and that's where you can rely on Jews from the Middle East to have a firsthand knowledge of that, you know? So let's put it this way. If a Jew from the Middle East tells you to amp up your security, listen to them.
Those collaborations are already in place. Like those collaborations are already in place. Like Mall of America right now, they do counterterrorism training with IDF. Like that is like that whole myth of like IDF is training our officers. That stems from counterterrorism training that officers do with like big scale operations. That's already happening.
In LA, by the way, Iola, they protest that. Like in LA, they go against the LAPD for working with the evil IDF Zionists.
You can protest it, but the contracts are written and signed.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things. Aimee, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something.
I just wanted to get back to. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth, you're saying.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that they have the security in like regular high schools even here where I live, which is not even a huge city or anything. I think that's just expecting that, especially with, you know, Jews. Like I had a family member was killed in the synagogue in you know, Philadelphia. So I think it's that I haven't been able to go back to temple because I haven't felt safe because it was vandalized. But there's lots of things that happen to the schools around here too, bomb threats. It's just a reality. But they also buzz us in before we can go into the temple. I still haven't felt safe enough, just because of how white it is here and how liberal, it is. But that was all I was gonna say. But all the schools, like high schools, and they have police, just regular high schools. So
Okay, go ahead, Aimee, and then I want to ask
I wanted to get back to the nuance that Iola was talking about, because I have a feeling that maybe people's questions were about the factor of like heavy police presence isn't necessarily maybe comfortable for certain demographics of the community. So my husband is Black, he's a Black man in America. And unfortunately for him, we got married a month before October 7th. So a lot of the sort of introductory experiences in the established Jewish community came with extreme police presence, which for him was at first very jarring. And so we had to have a lot of conversations about like why we have this. And the more he's learned and things like that, the more he's like, now he's the opposite. He asks me every time I go to a speaking engagement, like, what kind of security are they having there for you? Because he understands that. But like, I think that's definitely something that's important. And I think what's really important for community, centers, shuls, JCCs, whatever it is like you have to have that relationship with your security teams, whether it's private security, whether it's the police in your city or whatever, to have those conversations about, because they probably watch a movie and they think a Jew looks like Andy Samberg, and so they don't know that people that look different are walking in, and so you have to talk to them about that nuance of like, this is our community and this is how people need to be treated, and we need you here for a reason, but also like we need our congregants and guests to feel not scared to enter.
So I've got a few things that I want to comment on, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. The first one around security. As some of you know that I have a law enforcement background myself. Within the Jewish community, there are two main resources, one being Secure Community Network. They offer a variety of online programs around situational awareness, stop the bleed, active shooter type things. And the other one is CSS, which I believe is Community Security Services, which is a voluntary organization that will train local community members to help ensure the security of their communities. The last thing that I'll say is, Aimee, something that you mentioned just reminded me that within the White House anti-Semitism strategy, it mentions in the I believe in the opening few pages, ensuring that our law enforcement understand the diversity of our Jewish community. And broad stroke. And so even within the White House anti-Semitism strategy, it notes that we have to look at the diversity of who's a part of our community and how we're serving them when it comes to security. So for example, if we've got someone that is, because anti-Semitism comes from multiple angles, if it's someone that is a white supremacist and they see Iola and they're like, oh, she's Jewish and she's a person of color. Well, I get to check two boxes with that one. How are we ensuring that people that have multiple identity points are even more on the radar for our law enforcement as far as people to keep safe? So I think that that's also another important thing here. And as Boaz said earlier, Lehavdil, we're gonna stop this part here and then move into this last. I think this might be the last question. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, Sean, I don't know which of you guys know, but somebody that Nate's friends with named Shonda Walkovitz. She goes by Chala and Soul online. She's over in the Valley here in Los Angeles, and I had a really nice conversation with her, and she loves sharing our stuff, and she wanted to know a couple of things from you guys. But let's in line with the last question of something actionable from you guys. She wants to know. Let's start with the negative and go to the positive. And the negative.
Let's go with the positive.
Start with the positive. There you go. Fine.
Shonda, you're only getting one question.
Fine. She wants to know, how can synagogues incorporate diverse traditions, music, and cultural celebrations into their programs? Let's stick with the positive. let's think about synagogues, community centers.
So how?
What do you guys
So one piece of this is how can synagogues incorporate diverse traditions without culturally appropriating?
Thoughts?
I mean, I think it's important. Oh, please
Oh.
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I know of a few that do TBI, Tip About Israel. They have different events where they invite others from the community, like the LGBTQI, like all the different, you don't have to be Jewish just to come and celebrate and do like get together on certain days of the month, or they go to so they have Jewish renting out part of the Unity of the Valley section of this. I wouldn't call it a church. It's more the of just like all a mix of religions, Buddhism, whatever, however you say that, Judaism. They have anyway. So I have seen that, and I think that there's such a high respect, at least among this community, other than the outsiders, like the the dwellers that are kind of using substances and not really serious about life. But in this community there are a lot of people that respect the Jewish community, and so they actually bring them in as like speakers in a lot of the churches. The Catholic Church, a couple of them here. I know people that really want to be in contact with Jews and find out, and be there and support. So they're not in line with the Vatican. They're all like, telling me that. And so I think just right. I don't think it's culturally appropriating. It's connecting with Hashem or God or the sovereign of the universe, or however you want to do it, is all, under that one umbrella, whether there's one God, as most people will agree on, right? So, and then some also, go through Jesus, which is their, their thing, but they still do have that Hashem as being, the one sovereign. So I think to just do it and be, especially because Jews, especially to like Native Americans, I know, like the tribes that I know here, or even my own tribe, I see that they have a lot of respect for Jewish people, right, in the history and the ancient history, and so I think it's more of a privilege for other people to be a part of that experience.
Okay, let's try to get some quick hits on this.
Sorry.
Because this will be a good positive thing to get multiple ideas at. Matthew, hit us. What are some?
So first of all, really quickly, I can speak in terms of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. JIMENA has lesson plans that are available for all educators to download free of charge to incorporate into their Jewish studies classes. And you don't even have to be a Jewish school. It can be non-Jewish studies classes. So if anybody's interested in that, hit me up, Matthew2Ts@jimena.org. Aside from that, I want to name that it's really important to bring in speakers, bring in people who are of different, Jewish backgrounds, Black Jews, Middle Eastern Jews, Asian Jews, everybody who's sitting here, and every single person I think who's sitting on this panel tonight would be an incredible person to bring in to speak. And beyond that, I think it's important to look at who is representing you within the organization, synagogue, school, wherever that you're working. And is everybody there the same, or is there some diversity there as well? Because it's one thing to bring somebody in. It's one thing to bring in the Persian or the token queer person or whatever to speak. I'm happy to do it. Tokenize me all you want. I'm happy to do it. But when it comes to hiring people, I can't tell you, when I got into working in Jewish nonprofit, it was an uphill battle. Literally every job that I applied for, some of which I went on 3-4 interviews, I got passed up for somebody who was diaspora experience, was from Europe, and they were white presenting. Coincidence? I don't know. Am I being too sensitive? I don't know. But it's interesting that the organization that finally did hire me was a Mizrahi Sephardic organization. So just want to name that. Make sure that the people who are on staff and who are representing your organizations are diverse.
And Aimee in the chat pointed out, but pay us. Let's remember
That too.
just because you can fit the bill doesn't mean that you're obligated to do the tokenization for free. Why don't you actually get paid for your time?
And one more thing to hit to that is hire us for more than just diversity work.
Yes, and remember, let's circle back. This conversation is about this topic. This cannot be the only topic that you guys are good for. It's just not gonna be what it is. But
and you better give us those tokens for the tokenization.
The shuls just have to go to the source. If they want something authentic as far as traditions and stuff, ask the source. Ask people, what did your Safta cook for you on Shabbat? And maybe bring in a recipe, whatever, but you have to go to the source. You can't just, just try to make up stuff. You have to ask people, what traditions do you uphold, or, what things do you remember that your grandma did or your grandpa did, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Not just use this.
Lani and Mari, you guys wanted to each chime into this too. Let's get some more quick hits on this.
I was just going to piggyback off of what Matthew and BournRich said. I mean, not just use the source and, for questions or whatever, but you need to have them on the planning committee. You need to have them as the chairs, whatever you call it, to ensure that this doesn't, hit a nerve when you're planning these events.
Also, can we talk about culture? Because it's one thing to hire people into an organization and be like, oh yeah, we're going to hire you for your diverse expertise, blah, 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 blah. But then you don't support those people that you hire. And then when they burn out because they're working 5 other jobs in the job you're actually paying them for, you're literally like, well, they couldn't handle it. We can't find people to do this because you don't want to change your culture. I'm not talking about a particular workplace whatsoever, to make that very clear. But there is something to be said about hiring your diversity hires from Jewish community and the Jewish professional world, and then we do not support them unless it's EBID week and we have like a ton of things, and then any other time we're like, oh, well, that sucks. Not that I'm not talking about any specific organization, whatsoever.
I will just chime in there and say that this is something that if you look at post-racial justice uprisings of 2020, to where we are now, and look at some of the professionals within our Jewish ecosystem, what Iola is talking about is something that we definitely have seen for people who have been hired into roles, 5, 6 different roles within that role, burnout. So I think that there's something there. Lani, I want to make sure that we get you in here as well.
Well, I think especially post October 7th, the Jewish community has been very front and center on the global stage regarding the discussion of colonialism and indigeneity. And like I've said earlier, one thing that I've experienced is American Jews seem to forget or want to deny Indigenous rights here. And I think that one thing that could be very beneficial for bridging the gap between American Jews and Native Americans or other Indigenous communities, not just American Jews, but really globally speaking, is, take the time to, whose land is your synagogue on? What's the story of that land? What's the story of those people? Can you do anything to help bridge that gap, help learn about that history? A lot of communities, they have, resources available, websites available to know how to help get involved and how to help learn about, whose land you're on. And I think that it could really help bridge that gap.
Lani, one thing that
so glad you said that.
Land acknowledgement has started in Oregon since October 7th. In all the synagogues I've been in, we always start with land acknowledgement. So that is something that's really awesome that has took place, and especially in my immigrant and refugee nonprofit that I work, we do land acknowledgement every morning before we start the day. So I am glad that we're starting to move in the direction of I
do love land acknowledgement, but oftentimes it's used as checking the box. You're just checking the box and then you're not doing anything beyond that.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, in one way, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad we're finally being acknowledged, right? But there's so many issues that Indigenous communities face beyond that. A lot of a lot of our issues are, you know, we live under what I describe as like an invisibility cloak. Our communities are just like, when you're looking at, I've had a lot of people make a comparison between the size of the Jewish population and the size of Native American population, but what they're not really realizing is when you break down the numbers per tribe, it's not at all the same. Our communities are so small, and we don't have the same resources. Most of our communities, now there are some tribes that are better off or whatever, but for the most part, our numbers are small. We don't have the resources, and this could be a really valuable way to educate yourselves and your communities wherever you're located, and help bring up other Indigenous communities who are facing the same struggles.
Okay. Emily was finally about to say something, and boy, she's been way too polite, but it's okay. It's perfect timing because I had a question about Indigenous community. So we're going to go straight to you, Emily, on this, because you and Jenny, we've heard from way too little on this. And I don't mind. I know there's people who love just being a part of this and immersed by other people, but trust me, we still want to hear from all of you anyway. Now, Sherry Trotter, she's from Indigenous, I want to get it right, but specifically the co-director of the Indigenous Coalition for Israel, the MP at Indigenous Coalition and Indigenous Embassy in Jerusalem, and deals with the Maori people in New Zealand. Very interesting. So she had a question that had to do with indigeneity, I believe. So she wants to know, and I'm going to ask you this, Emily, do you consider yourself Indigenous? This is, I guess, specifically targeting you and Elizabeth and Lani especially. And how do you reconcile this with your national identities? So I'd like you to start this off if you don't mind.
Okay, by national identity, does that mean like the United States? Is that what she's getting at?
I believe that's what she was asking. Yes.
Okay.
Like coming from
So
somebody
like,
from another, she's from another country. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, it's a very thorny question. Would I consider myself Indigenous? Yes, certainly. I'd say Indigenous to Turtle Island, which is the United States of America. How do I reconcile that with my nationality as a person from the United States? You know, it's very complicated. Many of my family members are in the military because, you know, I think Native Americans feel very, obviously, we want to defend this land. We worked really hard. I think it's definitely a very challenging question. We've got what you got. And, you know, we fought a long time to be able to become sovereign nations within the United States, and however people want to kind of construe that. So yes, I'm happy to call myself an American if my tribe, Muscogee Nation, can be sovereign within it. So that's fine by me, as long as the sovereignty comes first.
I noticed in your book that I'm not finished reading, I noticed that you toggle a lot between what I expected, which was Native American and American Indian. I actually am very curious about how you decided what to use for when. Is it based on the timing with it being a child, based on what the vernacular was in society, or is it that those are actually terms that colloquially are acceptable, even though I wouldn't think American Indian is at all acceptable?
It's actually
my cousin loves American Indian. He prefers it. So it kind of depends who, like your own personal preference is from what I've understood.
I've been told by like PhD doctors and natives, no, it's American Indian, not Native American, because we're not American.
Yeah. And not Indigenous, because Indigenous is like, takes away the Americanness. Is that,
so?
Have you found that too?
Legally, we're referred to as American Indians in a lot of treaties and legal documents between our nations and the United States government. So for legal purposes, from what I understand, a lot of natives, especially older generations, I mean, that was a term that was definitely preferred. I hear a lot more variation in people's opinions in the younger generations. We were always taught to say we're Indian, not American Indian. I don't know why, I just know you're Indian, and not Indian or American Indian or you're Native. But legally, it's important that we maintain that identity so there's no issues with the U.S. And their treaty obligations. That's how I understand it.
My dad
I'm
says
so glad there's so many of us so that nobody, one person has to answer this question. Sorry to step on your toes.
And I would answer that question about, I have had that struggle because I feel like even though I didn't grow up native on the tribes, I feel more Jewish, but because I have ancestors here and I don't know, I've grown up here, I'm scared to ever leave America, right? It's weird. The medicine so, you know, I'm Jewish and I'm Native American or American Indian, right? I happen to be, but my family's history is so complicated that I consider myself just rooted, you know, and I'm actually, my daughters have been to Israel. My grandma went to Israel. I am too scared to go to the Middle East. My brother was in so many wars over there. So I'm too scared, but,
isn't it interesting how we've come full circle?
Don't be afraid.
Linguistically, no, don't be afraid. I would agree.
That's all I would say.
I would like to add to that.
You'll
like
feel safer on the streets of Israel than in America. I'll tell you that.
I was gonna say. Yep.
My personal opinion, I prefer the term Native American because Native comes first. It's pretty simple for me. I understand, you know, the legalities or whatever of needing to maintain the American Indian identity, but for me, Native comes first. I am also American, but that identity was kind of imposed onto me. My nation that I'm at least legally recognized by is MHA Nation, even though I come from multiple tribes. I, as well, you know, I have, you know, one of the I guess my story is I'm Native, but I also have family members who arrived during the earliest, you know, colonial era, and I have family that came over in 1905 as refugees and found safety here, and so I've learned to embrace kind of all aspects of that history in my identity. But I will say that America is still an imposed identity onto my nativeness, even though I can embrace what America has done for like my Jewish ancestors that came here seeking safety. So I think it's a really complex question, and I think it's probably it probably varies for every individual.
Wow,
that's a good answer. I agree.
It definitely is. Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that this could be another 4 hours, and we still would feel like we didn't get through everything. But
We
that's
get
not
like
doing it.
3 questions of all these questions.
That's okay. I love throwing it out and just letting the conversation be natural. You guys have been awesome. Now I wanna. It's okay. Aimee just left us just as we were gonna ask you guys a last thing that I want you to go round robin with fast. What I want to ask you guys is, it's 2025. Nate was just saying, let's finish with this positive question. In 30 seconds or so, I want each of you to just tell me what gives you hope. All right, let's finish on a positive note. It's 2025. What gives you hope at this point? Let's just go around in a circle so nobody feels like they're interrupting anyone else. Let's start with BournRich on the bottom of the screen and work our way up then to Jenny and move it up. So Bourne, what gives you hope right
now? What gives me hope is okay, my dog's squeaking, but I guess the younger generation, the kids. My daughter, she's 4, she's in Ghana in Israel, so just seeing that generation and the brightness in their eyes, and just trying to work towards a better world for them, you know. I just see like the hope and the promise in these kids' eyes, and that's where it's at. Like the old Whitney Houston song, "I believe the children are our future," you know. So I think if we you know, raise them up to be proud Jews and to be outspoken and to try to make a difference in the world, that's what's gonna That's what's going to help us. And yeah, that's what I look forward to, is this new generation.
I want to see you make a mural of that quote from Whitney Houston. That would be a fantastic one. Right in the middle of Pico Robertson, put it on the side of Factors or something.
There you go.
Be
Let's
great.
make it happen.
I'll connect you to the people.
Okay.
Jenny.
I follow some of you. It's just like an honor. I'm going to say real quick that I was even asked to do this, and I really just was enjoying myself, like listening to other people's perspectives. What gives me hope is, this might sound like super trite, but Israel, in a lot of ways, and I'll tell you why, because I think it starts conversations amongst those who are either they identify or they're tribal members. And like, I never felt more in touch with who I am until I went there, because it's like, I'm a person of color, always felt that way. And then when I got there, it's like, oh, the majority of the people are people of color. And then I also have the Jewish identity. So like, I think just having these conversations after even things that are really difficult, like October 7th happening, is giving me hope, because not just between us, but then the rest of the world. So like social media, I think, is changing everything. So it's like flipping that script, but like telling the truth. And I think that the truth coming together, as difficult as and wars as there are involved, that's what's giving me hope, is that like the truth is like the sun, and it always comes out eventually.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. He can paint that on the side of the other side of Factors.
Yep.
All right,
Aimee.
Aimee.
Me. Oh,
Yay.
that was quick. I see myself at the top of the screen, so I'm like waiting for the last. Spaces like this, you, Boaz, I mean, honestly, being a part of this, being a part of the conversation, having our voices be heard, having a platform where we can even speak and share our opinions. Yeah, I think just having like-minded people like us come together and network is huge and life-changing, and it's a ripple effect on the world. So we got to keep it up.
I'm grateful that you got introduced to me at the end by Eliana, who we're not at yet. Emily.
Yes. What gives me hope is that it's 2025. Speech is still free, and we can all use our voices. Let's keep it up.
Still free till at least the
Still free.
Till at least the 20th of this month. It is still free. I agree. Oh, I didn't.
Hey.
Did I just go? Oh, shit. What did I do? Elizabeth.
What gives me hope is just the universe of knowing that the light always wins. It's like light is always there, kind of like the sun always comes out, and this is great. I really appreciate being part of this, and I've always just kept that. I mean, obviously 10/7 wrecked me forever, like still, but I, growing up with that hope being instilled with me that we can do anything we want, and nothing is impossible, and just to be your best self and keep shining and be a light, and that's all we can do, and let that light come at towards you and you, and that's how I find hope.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate it. And sorry you had so many tech problems with this, but
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know if I was. I just kept not seeing
it. Doesn't matter though. We got you. You handled it. So thank you. Tabby, my friend Tabby.
You know what gives me hope? Pagers give me hope. The fact that October 7th almost ruined me, and then afterwards you had, in a very short span of time, the end of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, in a guest room of all places.
Oh yeah.
Perpetrated, by the way, by his own bodyguards. And Sinwar and Hassan Nasrallah and a whole lot of others. This gives me so much hope that I almost feel like I'm an Israeli about it, And
don't forget Assad.
Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, so that was gonna be my next one. I'm a moderate, but I really hope that we can have a continuation of Abraham Accords with the Saudis. But I do have to tell you, I wouldn't be Iranian if I didn't say that my ultimate dream is the Cyrus Accords. So for me, it's very geopolitical, that hope. It's not really even so much in America or in Americans. It's about a completely new reality in the Middle East. There'll still be a lot of fanaticism in the Middle East, but my homeland planned and funded October 7th. It's nothing to be proud of. But I really think that if my homeland can be freed, it can actually ironically hold that key for that hope that we all want. And that's mine.
Tabby, for anybody who doesn't, for any one of you who might not be following Tabby, you've got to. She is the opening article after David Suissa writes his own thing in his own paper. She is the opening article of every Jewish journal, and there is a reason for it. And it's not because the Persians are the most important topic every week. It's because
we're not.
No, I'm sorry. It's not the reason. It's because it's because of pagers. It's because the first word made us all laugh more than we have this whole time. Her stuff makes you cry and it makes you laugh out loud and it's fucking hilarious. And
thank you. It'll mostly make you cry.
No, you write about your mother and you complain about her and that makes us laugh. I'm sorry.
That's not fair. That's because she doesn't read me.
Exactly.
Thank you. I am online. If you're not in LA, you can get it every week in print. But I would really love it actually if maybe we did a reply all to the emails and sent each other our names and handles, because I'd really like to start following each and every one of you. That would give me a lot of a good reason to scroll.
I will not be preventing any of you from each other. I'm gonna be the shadchan here, so don't you worry about it. And to your point of things that mattered to you, what should give everybody some hope if you liked the things that she liked, is that I'm going to have future episodes about Iran, both the IRGC negative stuff that we got to talk about, pre-post revolution stuff, and I'm going to have ones just about cultural Iranian stuff and the dance and the traditions, and that's all going.
God, you're having two?
God willing, with Tabby next to me, but she's stressing about it because. But
no. Can I also be on the record? Nothing's wrong with alcohol, but this was actually like this Waterloo.
But I was gonna say we're doing that, and I'm also doing a special episode on the Abraham Accords with somebody helping me who was actually working in Dubai on them on the ground floor. So that'll be cool. So we're going to bring that up. Let's continue.
Let's wrap up.
Let's continue. Matthew, tell us your words of hope.
I mean, it's very similar, if not the same as my friend Tabby's here. I would say there's a lot of things that give me hope, but one of the things that has consistently given me a lot of hope in the last year or even 2 years is the young people of Iran who have been fighting tooth and nail, and not only fighting tooth and nail for their freedom, but have seen a kinship with Jews and with Israel, and view Israel as a country that has managed to fend off the Islamist extremism, which is now ruling over their lives. And to go beyond that, as Tabby was saying, a free Iran, a free and democratic liberal Iran would change the entire landscape of the Middle East. And you can trace a direct line from all the chaos and instability that's happening, not just in the Middle East, but on college campuses here in the US and in the West, and with all of these ridiculous protests. You can trace a direct line to the regime. So that is my hope, and that's what gives me hope.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You are a soundbite machine. Iola, please tell us.
I got a sneaking suspicion you're going to ask this, and I'm like a pessimist by nature. So like I actually wrote something down before this even, because I was like, I have to be positive. Here we go. What gives me hope for the future is knowing that I'm living history. My children are living history, and we are all living history. And as history has taught us anything, is that we are people who continue to endure and thrive. Whether it's my birth mother who journeyed from Israel to Minnesota, I don't know why, like snow is cold, or an adopted mother who grew up in Stevens, Arkansas, in Jim Crow South. My story and our stories are deeply rooted in resilience. My name, which is inspired by the pen name of Ida B. Wells. This is why, like, I will cuss you out if you call me Lola, because it shows me you know nothing about Black history here in America, because Iola was Ida B. Wells' pen name. So, like, if you learn nothing tonight about me, learn that, keep that. Which further connects me to a legacy of courage and advocacy. I literally come from hope.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you very, very much.
I see that with you too.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate that. All right, Mari.
Gosh, this is like a loaded question, but first of all, you all have definitely given me a lot of hope and a lot to dwell on and defining who I am. And I just want to say thank you all, because this has just been such an amazing experience. And I am one who believes that, you know, I'm constantly growing and learning. And so this definitely helped me and my journey. But the hostages are giving me hope right now, because we know that they are still fighting and they are in some of the worst conditions, but they're alive. And I know that they're not well, but we know that they are still here, and the families are giving me hope that they are holding on and being strong for their loved ones. My children definitely give me hope. Modern day Maccabees in the making. I am so proud of my boys and all that they are carrying with them, that they're learning in Jewish day school, getting the education that I didn't get growing up. And I am just so excited to raise these two beautiful boys. And lastly, my interfaith family, and it not diluting any of my Jewish identity. I just have to put that there. I know that didn't come up, but yeah, I think it's an important topic. So hopefully, Boaz, you will have an episode on that and what it means to be in an interfaith family.
Yes.
I love that.
I would love to. I hate when I see divisions online. I think you guys should know that about me. In case it's not crystal clear, I don't give a shit how many men versus women or Black versus white or Jewish versus non-Jewish are on there. I want it to just be what makes sense and just fill it up. What I care about is I just want to have people show that we have a lot in common. We have more in common than we have divided. That's what matters. That's what matters here, is that we can see that whether we're gay or straight or Jewish or non-Jewish, and who gives a shit if it's patrilineal descent or matrilineal descent. This isn't about you and your family and deciding who's marrying your son in religious institutions. This is just about us getting along as humans. And we should just be able to have these conversations, and we should be able to just get along. So let's just get rid of these damn echo chambers. This conversation is because everybody who's going to watch this is going to see if that, oh, wait a second, I follow these 4 people over here because I'm Republican, and that's all I see is other Republicans, and everyone else is an evil Marxist, and they're going to watch it for that reason. But guess what? There's going to be a bunch of people that were evil Marxists that are on here, and they're going to now you're going to be on their feed, they're going to be in your feed, and they're going to be suddenly learning things that they haven't before. And vice versa.
We're hacking the algorithm.
We
That's what
are
we're doing.
absolutely hacking the algorithm. And if you don't think that's my #1 reason for doing this, you're wrong. That is my #1 reason. The pro-Zionism that comes along with it is the byproduct, not the other way around.
Raymond, we're next.
I wish I had done what Iola did and make a speech, because I sometimes don't spend too much time sitting with hope. And it's not because I'm a negative, but it's because I tend to want to just be in action. And so, but I will say, to speak to hope, is that it's, you know, it's calls like this. It's the screen of people that I've had the pleasure and privilege of sitting with tonight. It's people I've met over the last, you know, year or so, as this journey for me has intensified and gotten very personal. It's people I met in my recent trip to Israel. And so that's where my hope lies when I hear and read things that speak to a future that just makes more sense. But I try to just live with purpose, and I have a tremendous sense of purpose right now, and both raising my daughters and producing and working in a life that is steeped in a mission, really. And so that gives me the purpose that I hope, becomes the hope. But it's me putting one foot in front of the other and doing this work and being in this space on a daily basis.
Thank you. You did not need to have anything written. That was great. Eliana, who amazingly, let me just shout out, Eliana was going to be my one person who was only able to be here for the first hour because she's supposed to be studying for the medical boards right now. And here she is, just like Tiffany Haddish in the first episode, who said, I've only got 20 minutes on my book tour. Hour 45 minutes later, Tiffany is like, I think I gotta go. So thank you for prioritizing this unpaid conversation just because you give a shit. Eliana.
I mean, I didn't want to leave. I've been learning so much from you all, and I also had more to say and should work on being more assertive on Zoom. But so what gives me hope? I don't know if you guys have seen, but there has been a group of about 30 people in Korea who every single Saturday since October 7th, they have gathered every Saturday at 11:30 a.m. With their Israel flags and their signs saying we support Jews in rain or snow. There's literally photos of them in their snow gear with during a rainstorm with their umbrellas every single Saturday. And I follow them and I keep up with everything that they're doing, and it brings me so much joy.
It's so cute.
I know. It honestly, whenever I see their posts, it warms my heart, and I just look forward to it every single Saturday. I think another thing is that it gives me hope that Korea overall is generally pro-Israel, and that that really means a lot to me. And I think there are several factors that go into it. One, a lot of Koreans are Christian, and so they know their Bible and understand that Jews are indigenous to Judea, and that's a historical fact. Another reason I think a lot of Koreans are pro-Israel is that Koreans, more so than a lot of other groups, are able to recognize an imperialistic power. Korea was under Japanese rule for 35 years up until the end of World War II, and Koreans were forced to learn Japanese and forced to assimilate. Some of my relatives were forced to be sex slaves to Japanese soldiers. Experiences that are not dissimilar to what Jews in Arab countries have experienced. So I think Koreans in general are more willing to call out Arab imperialism in the Middle East and North Africa. And it makes me hopeful that they're able to see the truth and see through propaganda. And yeah, you guys, I'll share the profile with you guys so you can follow their
approach. It's wonderful. And let me just point out, it might be obvious, might not be obvious to people who are listening who don't know the history of Korea and Japan. But from the little bit I learned about it from actually when I got to visit Japan, Koreans still don't have the equal right to live in Japan. You can be a third generation Korean living in Japan and you still don't have the same land ownership rights and so on. So it's everything you're saying isn't just something that like, oh, until the end of World War II, it's like till today.
Like my mom was born in 1954 after Korea was liberated, but it was still necessary for her to learn Japanese. And so she's fluent in Japanese and Korean. So yeah, it lingers.
It does. Wow. Thank you for that.
Japanese people, because they have a ton of trauma themselves and face horrible racism here, and we're forced to be in detainment camps. But I'm just, my message is that Koreans understand what a colonial and imperialistic power is, and they can recognize that,
Yeah, and we can take some, we can smile about that when we see it, and we can appreciate it and support that group. And Lani, last but not least, certainly.
What gives me hope? A lot of things give me hope, actually. I would say Indigenous communities on the front lines, defending land and water, preserving life, and maintaining balance for all life. I would say Israel, as someone who's reconnecting, as someone who is, the result of colonialism and forced assimilation, and to see an Indigenous nation reestablish their sovereignty and still to this day, fighting for their right to exist and winning. reviving their language, to see the response from the Jewish community after October 7th is nothing short of inspiring and empowering. It makes me so proud to be Jewish as someone who is just kind of embarking on this journey and finding confidence in my identity. It's such a, I mean, I don't even know how to explain the shock of October 7th. I know that we all feel the same way, but to see the action of the Jewish community across the globe stand up, and when we feel like we're backed into a corner and we're outnumbered, and here we are, we're smiling, we're living joyfully, we're standing up, and we're doing something. And it's truly an honor and just an incredible blessing to witness.
Amen to that. And from the two people who, with their regrets, had to leave early, Abraham already texted me saying he had an absolutely fantastic time being able to meet everybody and be on here. And Aimee said that she would have stayed on if her husband wasn't starving, and that she had an absolute pleasure to connect with lots of new faces, and absolutely would again. So I'm really, really glad we were able to. Somebody who would be a guest if he wasn't my close friend and work in this space is sitting next to me. So Nate, can you please tell us yourself?
Oh, hell. I made the question, but I didn't plan on having to answer it myself.
Don't care.
I think that there are probably a few things that are giving me hope. One of which being Israeli people. Like the Sabra mentality is so strong. I mean, this most recent trip when I was in Israel in December, just being in awe of how people are not just Israelis are living their day-to-day life, but thriving with the most intense of situations, whether it's the economic standing within Israel right now, whether it's having to run for shelters on a regular basis. The fact that people are still going about their day-to-day lives gives me hope. The other thing that tremendously gives me hope is doing this, bringing together people with diverse lived experiences, diverse voices, diverse political opinions to engage in conversation and dialogue for the public sphere, and also to deepen relationships is something that really gives me hope. We're at a time where authentic relationships are what is going to be paramount. And the more that we're seeing this, the better off we'll be. I can imagine that some of you all are going to connect separately offline from this and further those relationships. And that's what gives me hope is just seeing how we can bring light and positivity to what a lot of people feel is such a dark and dismal time. So since you asked me, gotta ask you, 2025, what gives you hope?
Well, as much as I am thin-skinned, and people don't realize I am very thin-skinned, I don't do well with trolls. Me going into this game I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm already a nurse. I literally get paid to clean people's shit for a living. I get paid to help people die a less terrible death. I get paid to help people get better, but they don't always get better. This is what I've dedicated the last almost 12 years of my life to doing, and it's what I'm going to be doing again this Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for 13 hours a day. What I'm doing here is not something I expect ever to get paid for. I'm not going to complain if I ever do, but I don't expect it. Never gotten 1 red cent for my advocacy efforts or for a single article that you've seen me write. What gives me hope is the same thing that gives me hope in the hospital, which is seeing the personal connections with each patient and each family member, and knowing that even if the patient isn't getting better, they've appreciated the lived experience that they had with me, knowing that the family members might be coming back a few weeks later to tell me that so-and-so died at home, but that they appreciated how much less horrible those last days were of their life. It's not always about the ending. It's often about the journey.
Mm-hmm.
My journey right now is that I've got a wife who's got a lot of anxiety because her brother is a tour guide in Spot, and he's got a whole slew of wonderful children who are varying degrees of scared every day up north with the sirens going off and acting like they're all smiley, but having absolute trauma, because how can you not with sirens going off every day? My mother grew up with it in England and born in 1939, and she still remembers it from the air raids in England. And now we've got the next generation of people getting their own PTSD from it, not to mention having to worry literally about, whatever. What gives me hope is that every single day I'm sort of like OCD about making new connections, ones that I've made with each and every single one of you over the past few weeks to last year. The fact that there is probably less than 5% of the people that I've connected with that I'm not still in connection with post episodes. I'd be surprised if I wasn't in contact with every one of you within the next week. And the fact you guys are just, it gives me a lot of hope to be able to make these personal contacts, make them matter. And the fact that I don't give a shit who's MAGA and who hates Trump, and I don't give a shit who's protesting Netanyahu and who's supporting Netanyahu. I just give a shit that we show that we have so much more in common than we really knew. I think we need to get back to building the bridges. I'm the opposite of Piers Morgan and Bill Maher. They like to gather people to watch the slugfest happen, and it's damn entertaining, but it doesn't actually get us anywhere forward. I'm all about trying to get people to show that we have a lot more in common and a lot more kumbaya than we thought we did. And that's what gives me hope, and I appreciate it. And I'm sorry that I yammered on so long that I had to that BournRich had to go take care of his puppy who was crying on the side. And there he is, BournRich. I was just saying, I know you had to take care of your pups. So you guys are what give me hope, and I look forward to continuing to talk to you. And I'm going to go back to my original oath, which is that you guys each tell me other passions of yours, which some of you already have. I've definitely talked a lot to some of you, like Jenny and so on. I know some of you like 17 million things about you, and some of you I don't know enough. Give me more info. I'm going to get you on episodes that have literally fuck all to do with the color of your skin or your ethnicity, even if that also plays into a part of it. So thank you for your time and for sharing your lived experiences. However optimistic or pessimistic you feel, I think we could all agree that this conversation is at least productive. And I hope you all feel that way.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
So much.
Thank you all.
Awesome connecting with everybody.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year. Every one of you, if you're in LA or when you come to LA, look me up, come for a Shabbos meal.
All of us.
But seriously, we've had
Can't wait to
countless
go
meals
home.
together.
Love it.
Spend Shabbos here at my place with my wife and I and my kids, okay?
Yeah. I miss.
Have a
I
good
miss
week,
home.
y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Chosen Links. If you like what you heard, feel free to share this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our socials at Boaz Hepner on X and Facebook and at Hepner.Boaz on Instagram.